Right.
And then we can just, and someone can just sort of like go on YouTube, flash a thumbs up and make sure.
Ron is in. Hold on. Ron's coming in.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. Let's go. All right.
And Will.
And Ron's just coming in too. Let's just wait till
Ron and Will.
Is that
Ron
a
and
fire
Will.
everyone shirt there, Jeff?
All right. So let's do this. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everyone. It is the top of Mount Manitoba, the home of Notinhalloffame.com, and I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Kirk Buckner. I co-own Notinhalloffame.com along with my partner, Evan Nolan. Say hi, Evan.
Hi, Evan.
I knew you'd do it just the way I asked. Perfect. We know each other far too well, but we are here to introduce the mock finalists for the Pro Football Hall of Fame of 2023. So we have already put together our first group, which was our group of semifinalists. What we're going to do a little bit differently this time, though, is when we were looking through everything, if you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, this guy wasn't a semifinalist, that's because he's one of our semifinalists. So we are combining what we came up with, what the actual hall came up with, and we're selecting 15 people from a group of 39. Everyone understand?
Yeah.
Okay. That was kind of rhetorical, but all good. So I'm going to just turn it over to one of our good friends. You're a good friend, my good friend from the city of Chicago, Jack Silverstein. Jack, can you tell us exactly how we're breaking this down today?
Yes. Hi, everybody. So like Kirk said, we have a list of 39. That is 15 semifinalists that were on our list as well as the actual list. And I believe it's 11 that were only on our list, 13 that were only on their list. If you're watching, the reason that the lists are so split up is that our group tended to favor players who are a little bit later in their eligibility. And you're probably going to see something to that effect. But regardless, we're coming up with 15. The way this is going to work is that Kirk is going to give us the total vote counts for all 39 from top to bottom. We are going to lop off anyone with 0 or 1. Although if you're here and you voted for the 1 and you really want to make a case for like 30 seconds, feel free. But we're going to lop off the 0 to the 1 votes at the bottom. We are going to, let's see, Kirk said there were 17 was the high vote count.
17 is the highest vote count, yes.
17 was the high vote count, but we had 21 ballots, which means
22.
that 22 ballots, which means that the top vote getter missed 5 votes. So there's a lot of discussion to be had. And Kirk, as always, will pick a number, whatever makes sense of the top people who we think are all, should go in. And we will see if we can move some people in. And then we're just going to work from top to bottom. And we're going to talk about every single player, have someone who knows their case well state it, but in the briefest way possible. And we're going to go top to bottom. We're going to talk about everybody, and then we're going to do our votes. Few things to consider. We're voting for 15 finalists, but ultimately we're only voting for a class of 5. What ultimately matters is the class of 5. So for example, there are 25 or 28 semifinalists in the real group. 8 of them are wide receivers, something we've talked about. Do you need 8 wide receivers when you only have 28 semifinalists? We have 3 people who are in their final year of eligibility: Albert Lewis, Henry Ellard, Pat Swilling. We'll probably talk a while about them. And if one of those gets in, think about what that might do to the position group. If you feel like Albert Lewis is going in, you need all the corners in behind him. If you feel like Pat Swilling is going in, you need all the linebackers in behind him, because we do want a nice mix of positions, because we're going to come back in January, I believe, to do the final. And when we do that, everyone is going to be presenting one player. And so we're going to, again, be able to hear more. This is our 3rd year doing this. Our first year, we put in a class of 4. Last year, we put in a class of 5. I suspect this year will be a class of 5. But what's important is that we're going to lay it all out, every player, top to bottom, and then get to the votes. And when we're speaking, we want to really stay on the topic of each player.
Okay, so with that, Evan, can you present those who we're eliminating right away?
Well, let's go through who's actually here first. Then we'll go into who those we're
Sure.
eliminating. So hold
We'll
on
do
a
that.
second here. So here is the list. I divide everyone into 3 groups: the us group, the both group, and the them group. So that us is the vote that we had back in November that I unfortunately missed due to COVID protocols. The them group is the voters themselves, and both is where we overlap. As you can see, there's a big difference in what we did and what they did. So I have everything blocked out here. We'll go reveal as we go through as to who is in each category. So we're going to start with the ones who are eliminated. And there are 2 with 1 and 1 with 0. And they are Anquan Bolden, Hines Ward, and surprisingly to me with 0, Vince Wilfork. So does anyone have any particular strong things to say about Ward or Bolden?
Good riddance, Ward. Thank you.
You and I are,
Okay, well, so let me
the
play
people
devil's
who
advocate
made-
for a second. I'm the
Did
person.
anyone, well, hold on. Did anyone who actually voted for Bolden or Ward,
That's me.
which one did you pick?
I voted for Hines Ward.
All right, let's hear it.
So it's the overall game. It isn't his numbers. I think this is such a backlog for wide receivers that you can use whatever arbitrary standard you want to have a wide receiver in the hall. But I feel like what the team that he was on and what his role was and what he was asked to do, he played it at a Hall of Fame level. Now, do I think he's a better wide receiver than some of the other guys? Like he's as an actual catcher of the football, he was very good. He wasn't Torrey Holt, but he combined that with being an unbelievable blocker and a factor in the run game for a team that was focused totally above average amount on running the football. So his contributions in the run game totally can't be taken away from him. And he was a big play player, which is another thing I feel like when I'm thinking about these players, I remember what they did in really important games. And I felt like particularly in the Super Bowl and other big games that he was a strong player. I get him not being in this list. He won't make the Hall of Fame, I don't think, in his career. But I voted for him because that was my choice compared to who else was available and for the reasons I just stated.
He
Thank
just
you.
feels like
Thank you. So Will, what I'll say to that is, based on voting patterns, every first ballot semifinalist, which includes Hines Ward, is either in the Hall of Fame or on the ballot now. So the choices we're making are not about whether or not, if we don't talk about him now, he's not going in. Hines Ward is getting into the Hall of Fame at this point. However you feel about that, however I feel about it, Jeff, Brian, whomever, Hines Ward is getting into the Hall of Fame. So the question here is, has anyone been swayed? I think we all know the argument for Ward, or can we lop off and keep it moving?
I think we can lop off because we got the number of wide receivers we've got. You think about Andre Johnson, Torrey Holt, Steve Smith, even like Reggie Wayne, and then you've got Hines Ward. Like, I'm sorry, like it's a numbers game as much as anything. It's a no for me.
As we say in my family, shit cannon. Evan?
all right, excellent. All right, so we're gonna.
I'm the one that voted for Bolden, and I can be brief. I just thought of him as a tough guy, like an all Madden type receiver, a guy that's literally stuck his nose out and fought for his team yard for yard.
Literally, yeah.
Clearly not numbers aren't going to match up, but I thought he'd. When looking across, I wanted a little diversity on my ballot instead of just picking between others, so I threw him in there. Same reason. I'm the one that voted for Bolden, and I can be brief. I just thought of him as a tough guy. But I thought, like all of those guys, was like, that's a guy, that's an NFL guy, and I think he deserves a nod for me.
Okay, that's good. All right, so let's cut those. That's down to 36. And Kirk, take it away. Give us the
Okay.
votes, or Evan, top to bottom, and let's hear them all.
All right. So my application is back. See if I can figure this one out. I always have trouble with when you hide the first column. All right. So we had 2 with 17. Our top 2 were Joe Thomas and Patrick Willis. And with 16, we had Zach Thomas and DeMarcus Ware. Continuing down.
Are we?
Are we going to talk about them, or what do you want?
No. I want to
Well,
see.
I'm asking-
I want to see the full list first. We got into that
Okay.
problem last time where all of a sudden we were in the middle.
I'm not asking to talk about them. I'm asking if they would automatically advance. That's what
Not
I'm
yet.
asking.
Let's see the whole list first.
Okay. 15, Torrey Holt, Darrell Rivas. 14, Andre Johnson. Coming in at 13, Dwight Freeney and Devin Hester. 12, Jared Allen and Rondé Barber. At 11, Henry Ellard. So you can see everyone who got 11 or more votes was on both lists. just so we have that clear. 10, Randall Cunningham, Tom Nalen, Pat Swilling, and Albert Lewis. We had 2 with 9 and 1 with 8. Those are Richmond Webb and Reggie Wayne for 9. Leslie O'Neill with 8. With 7, Steve Wisniewski and Willie Anderson. 6 for Neil Smith, Kevin Williams, and Darren Woodson. 5 for Jari Evans and London Fletcher. 4 for Sean Alexander, Ruben Brown, and Ricky Waters. And then finally 3 for Eric Allen, James Harrison, Robert Mathis, Steve Smith, and Fred Taylor. And 2 for the 2 Patriots remaining, Ben Coates and Rodney Harrison.
Got it. All right. So it looks like if we were to just say our top 15 are in, which we're not going to do because we're going to discuss, but if we were to do that, our top 15 right now are Joe Thomas, Patrick Willis, Zach Thomas, DeMarcus Ware, Torrey Holt, Revis, Andre Johnson, Freeney, Hester, Jared Allen, that's 10, Barber, Henry Allard, Cunningham, Nalen, Swilling is 15, but Albert Lewis is tied, so that would be 16. So that's kind of where we are. So let's go top to bottom. And considering how the votes laid out, this is what I'd like to hear, because I think everybody knows what the case is for Joe Thomas. I think everybody knows what the case is for Patrick Willis, Zach Thomas, all these guys at the top. I would like to hear on each of these as we go top to bottom from someone who did not include those people. So is there someone here who did not vote for Joe Thomas? And tell me why.
I think I might not have had him, or if I did, not really because I don't want Joe Thomas to make it first ballot, because I think he's one of the greatest offensive tackles I've ever seen. It's more so just because there's other guys that I want too, and it's nothing against Joe Thomas. I want him in the Hall of Fame. I think he's first ballot, but I know he's gonna get it regardless. So I just made a vote for someone else.
So would that be fair to say that, because some of us, and I tried not to do this, but I wonder how many of us were sort of looking at this strategically, trying to sort of like leave off, because then some of these people that did not get 5 votes, I mean, I'll admit, all those top 4 guys, those were all votes that I did. So as they were all sort of matriculating through, it was a little surprising to me, but I wondered if some people, and if that's your process, great, we're just trying to extend that conversation.
I think it happens in the regular Hall of Fame process too, doesn't it? Like there's a reason that some guys get to the finalist round in year 19, year 20. So I don't think ours is much different than that. Ours is better, but it's not much different.
At least we're open about it.
Yeah, and this is Ron. Let me add, there was a situation in 2020 where a very prominent voter who's very fair and very even, minded about things, admitted that he did not vote for Troy Polamalu in the cut down from 15 to the next group before they decided the 5. And it was for exactly the reason we're discussing. It was because he wanted to see Steve Atwater and a couple of the others advance to that level so that they don't kind of fall into a black hole towards the last years of their eligibility.
Yeah,
and
remember that with Peter King.
Yep, exactly. And the thing is, some people got really angry, but he put it in a national column, and the idea of being transparent, which some of the selectors, it's great to see folks like Peter King, Clark Judge, and some of the others be transparent so we understand the process and what their considerations are.
Got it.
Hey,
So
Can't fault him for that.
So does anyone have an actual argument against any of the 4 of them?
Can we
So
see
it's-
them? Can we see
Yeah,
them
can we
again?
see it again?
Yeah,
Evan?
sorry. I just want to make sure that I'm not blocking the stream when people are talking. So hold on.
Okay, so we've got
I'll start with Zach Thomas, and it's an argument I made 2-3 years ago. I just don't see him as elite compared to other linebackers on the ballot and guys. I test. You can throw stats at me or not. I get it that other people think he's right there, obviously in a top 4 probable finalist position. The year we voted for was a couple of us didn't think Zach was up to it, but so just to be again brief, Zach Thomas is a great linebacker. I just think there's a lot of other good linebackers, a lot of other worthy candidates on this ballot that I put ahead of.
Yeah, I did. I did, not surprisingly, I did the same thing as you, Dave. And I was one of the Zach Thomas holdouts. I did it for the same reason. I, after that, went back, looked again, talked to more people. And I came around to, excellent player. I won't be a holdout, if he gets that far. When I was weighing out my ballot, as I was looking at it, I was going, okay, DeMarcus Ware, I'm going to put him in. Pat Swilling, I want him to be in the conversation. And between Patrick Willis and Zach Thomas, I'm more of a Patrick Willis guy first. So kind of I looked at it that way. And as I was getting down to these hard numbers with Richmond Webb and Neil Smith or Steve Wisniewski or Kevin Williams, it was like, all right, where can I cut? And Zach Thomas was one of my cuts. If Zach Thomas gets to our finals, I'm voting for him. But that was why I personally left him off. Same reasoning as Dave.
I call it really quickly with Zach Thomas. Maybe there's a distinction between him and Patrick Willis that some of us would draw. I certainly would. But we're talking about trying to get to the top 15 versus the
Exactly.
top 5. And I think there's a big difference between, let's say, a Zach Thomas and a James Harrison or a London Fletcher who are further down the list. I wouldn't have any issue, like if we said all the 17s and 16s advance through.
Okay. Well, anyone leave DeMarcus Ware off? Anyone want to talk through that one?
I think Thomas and Revis were like the only two probable first ballot guys I left off. Again, and as for Ware, I had him on. So yeah, that's really it.
Okay, that's fine. I mean,
I
the
just
people who
didn't
left
have
Ware
enough
off-
space for Ware.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to say. I didn't have enough space for him.
Okay,
Right, so
let's.
we
how
have
about-
no compelling arguments to keep any of these 4 off.
Yeah, how about the 15s? Torrey Holt, Darrell Revis,
Yeah.
No.
nothing. Andre Johnson. Okay, let's keep it going. All right,
Wait,
I
Yeah.
left.
I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't vote for Andre Johnson.
Go ahead, talk about it.
Jeff, are we talking about the top 5 or the top 15? That's why
We're running straight down the list so that we talk about everyone before we vote.
Okay, no, I have Andre Johnson ahead of Torrey Holt, just because he's the only one between him and Reggie Wayne, who didn't play with a Hall of Fame quarterback, Hall of Fame running back, and a Hall of Fame wide receiver on the other side. He was it on that team. I mean, you had Arian Foster, but
Totally. But Evan, why did you not include Andre Johnson?
Well, and here's the other thing. I think Andre Johnson's a Hall of Famer, so I'm not going to get in the way of Andre Johnson if he gets there
Right.
either. It's just that we have 15 spots, and I'm a firm believer that Holt should have been in before Bruce and should already be in. Reggie Wayne is, I guess, I know you're not a big Reggie Wayne guy, Jack, but in terms of the queue, if there is one, he has to be there, and Ellard's there too for me in his last year. I'm a huge Henry Ellard guy. You guys all know who I'm going to be pounding the table for when we get there. But if I'm pounding the table for a second person, it's Henry Ellard, who finished retired number 2 in all-time receiving yards for everything went crazy. So if I already have 3 wide receivers, for me, Andre Johnson was the 4th. That said, everything you just said about him being the only player on a crappy team is 100% true. So if you wanted to switch Andre Johnson and Reggie Wayne, I'm not that upset about it. I just think that Holt and Ellard have to be on the list for me.
Okay, good. Now we got 2 13s, Freeney and Hester. Again, I think we're still in the territory where everyone is pretty much predominantly in agreement that we would vote for all of these guys. The lone Zach Thomas thing apart, or maybe a Dwight, whoever. But I mean, I think for the most part, we're pretty much, if you had to do an 80% up down, we're pretty much voting all these guys in. I left Dwight Freeney off, again, a numbers game. He's very, he's early. Is he first year this year?
Yeah, this is first year on the ballot, Jack.
This is his first year. I would have left him. That was one of the ones where it was like the late night snooze fest when we were up at 3 hours, and we were just kind of like, and I left him off for that reason.
I left him off Dwight
but I like him.
But wait, my thing is with Dwight Freeney, I agree with his place being higher than Mathis. But when I look at some of the other names, like I see DeMarcus Ware as more of an impact player and pass rusher than Dwight Freeney was. And I even go back to the Super Bowl against the Bears. Like John Tate shut him down. Like, let's not understate that. Like an average NFL left tackle in the biggest game shut him down. So it's like Freeney has some good sack numbers, but he was really a one-dimensional player. And how great was he at that one dimension? Similar question that I have an objection that I have to Jared Allen even stronger for Jared Allen.
I didn't vote for Dwight Freeney either, though. I'd say that's partially for personal reasons, but we're not going to get into that right now. But objectively, though, I didn't leave Freeney in for the same reason why I didn't vote for Darrelle Revis or Joe Thomas. They're on the ballot for the first year of eligibility, so I just didn't really bother.
One thing I do want to mention, if I could, just that I find really, really interesting. Hester had the most votes, or was tied with the most votes when we did our preliminary. Somehow he didn't. I know that our voting body changed a little bit, but not that much. So I'm wondering if there's anyone here who had Hester in our first round and then took him off. Okay, I guess not.
That might have been me, just from a 25 to 15. Hester's not, he's outside my 15, but inside my 25. So that might have been a guy that I
did not have it either. I don't have it either.
Yeah.
I took them off.
Well, you're a hater, so, you know, I'm just kidding.
Well, I had to, I'm sorry.
Can I say something about the Andre Johnson thing?
Please.
Yes, sir.
I think it is a really interesting, you bring up an interesting point about the guy who's on the team and he's the only guy. And so you judge his accomplishments that way. But it's a team game, a team sport. And I know we're recognizing them for their individual achievements, but you would like to think that their accomplishments as a team player do make a difference. I know it gives them notoriety and so on. And I feel bad for the guys that play for Detroit, you know, but it does feel like that is important. It's as much a factor to say he helped a team win a Super Bowl by making XYZ plays as it is to say, well, he was a really great player on a terrible team.
Yeah. So let's say this about Andre Johnson. He was the Houston Texans franchise for a decade.
Yeah.
Like Torrey Holt can't say that. Reggie Wayne sure as hell can't say that. The other guys can't say that. Not only was he the franchise player, he literally was the franchise. Like we can talk about JJ Watt later, but Andre Johnson is the greatest Houston Texans player of all time.
Yeah, and let me just add my rationale with Andre.
Let's keep this moving. And you know what? Does anyone feel passionate about talking about Jared Allen or Rondé Barber? Because we've got now some interesting names coming up.
I feel very passionate about Rondé, if I could.
What I have to say about Jared Allen. Greatest retirement video I've ever seen of him literally riding off into the sunset.
This is make a Hall of Fame, but that's yeah, it's true. What you say is true. I just want to do my quick Barber thing if I could, and I'll just be as quick as I can. Just as a Saints guy, this guy scared the hell out of me. I wasn't as scared of Brooks or Sapp because I knew what they were going to do. Barber could do anything and everything. Barber was the one who frightened me the most, and I had him personally over John Lynch. So
scare factor is real.
Well, I mean, that Devin Hester is the ultimate one of those. Against Jared Allen, just by the way, if Jared Allen got a haircut, nobody would be voting for him. I'm sorry. He is a thoroughly very good player who could pile some stats.
Oh, you think
he's modern Mark Gastineau.
That's what
Except him and Klecko are basically reversed in this situation in which they're going hard for the defensive end, but leaving out the defensive tackle. In this case, it's reversed from the Jets. And as for Barber, I want him in because he's someone that played in every single game he was in. I think he's like one of the only guys that are like 20 sacks, 20 interceptions, and hey, it'd be the closest I get to Tiki Barber in the Hall of Fame. So I'm down with that.
Sorry, but if you're going to use that stat, just by the way, Rodney Harrison's the only two guys with 30 sacks and 30 interceptions.
Oh no, it's 40 interceptions, 20 sacks. I think it was, or the other way around.
And it's not like Tiki's going to be happy that he gets in. That should have been me.
All right. So let's.
You'll have the same bus regardless.
Yeah.
Let's move it. Hey, let's move it along because now we've got some names here where I think there's going to be a lot of conversation, interesting, a little bit more nuanced conversation. And there's two people here. There are a few people who haven't spoken yet, but I want to hear from Brian and I want to hear from Paul because we've gone 30 minutes and that's long enough to go without hearing you guys. So let's start here. I don't feel strongly about Henry Ellard. I know that Evan does. So between Evan and Brian and Paul, I'd like to hear about some of these next guys, and let's start with Henry Ellard. because this is where you go, boy, is this a guy who, if we don't vote him in now, we're all going to be scratching our heads and screaming in 4 years about, holy cow, now what do we do with this damn senior pool? Now we got to figure out a way to get Henry Ellard in. And that's the same situation with three of the next 5 guys who are on this list. So who wants to speak on Henry Ellard?
Ellard suffers from what I call the Jerry Rice problem, where he happened to share most of his career with the greatest of all time. So it's impossible to stand out in that regard. In a world without Jerry Rice, Henry Ellard, I think, would already be in the Hall of Fame. He would have more Pro Bowls. He'd have more All-Pros. I think that is clear from looking at the numbers and just watching the tape. He was the guy who could act as a deep threat and a possession receiver. He did both superbly. He was a first down machine. I mean, like 85% of his catches went for first downs, which was just absurd. He had seasons where 95% of his catches went for first downs. So every catch he made counted for something.
Ryan, what was he doing to gain this crazy first down percentage? What was it about him?
I think it was the routes that he ran, which is a combination of, the routes the coaches choose to put him in, and he tended to thrive in those sorts of routes. And I don't know if behind the scenes he said to his coaches, I'm not going to run short of the sticks or what. But if he did catch it short of the sticks, he was good at gaining yards after the catch. He was good at going up and getting contested catches. He was good at getting separation on deep routes. So whatever he did, he was getting the ball down the field, and he was doing it well.
And it's just to add on to that, Brian, he was doing it in a time where defenses could mug you,
Yes.
which is not something all these other guys who have passed him in yards are not in that situation.
Well, and I think there's
sorry, Jeff, let me just finish one more thing. To answer your question, Jack, whether or not we're going to be kicking ourselves, I think Henry Ellard's a Hall of Famer. This is the last chance we have to vote for him. But if you're talking about when we get to the seniors pool of wide receiver at this point, there are a couple people you can quibble on, but it is not really that deep, right? We're having serious discussions on Stanley Morgan, who's one of my favorite Patriots of all time, but I'd really never quite thought was a Hall of Famer, right? And he keeps being in the finalist group here all the time. I think Henry Ellard's got a significantly better shot than Stanley Morgan when we get there. That said, I still think he's one of the 3 best receivers on this list.
There's 2 things I want to say about Henry Ellard. One is Brian, you referenced the Jerry Rice problem. I also think of the Eric Dickerson problem and kind of like the offensive philosophical approach that team had, just how devoted they were to pounding the rock in the mid 80s with Dickerson until they traded him. Second question I have, it could be for you, Brian, it could be for Paul, trying to think through like, what's so fundamentally different between him and Art Monk? Whereas Ellard was actually his team's wide receiver one, where you could argue Monk for the most part was always wide receiver 2. Like looking at their careers and the numbers, like what's so dramatically different? Art Monk didn't take nearly this long to get in the Hall of Fame. Why has it taken Henry Ellard so long?
He didn't win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But yeah, he was just one. Go ahead.
I was just saying maybe we should just move on to our next one, which I believe is Randall Cunningham. Someone who hasn't spoken yet want to sort of like do a quick thing on Randall Cunningham, or who's our next one there, Evan?
Sorry, we were on the spreadsheet for too long. I wanted to get everyone.
No, that's good.
Some screen time. So Randall Cunningham, Tom Nalen, well, we know he's talking about that. Pat Swilling and Albert Lewis.
Okay, so let's just open that up, and if there's someone who hasn't sort of said anything, let's hear what you have to say on any of those 4 category players.
I do want to mention Randall Cunningham.
You have spoken, Vinny. The point was to have somebody else.
Hey, Paul or Chris, you guys got anything?
Yeah, you guys can speak. Why not?
I guess I was just gonna more on a philosophical or strategic approach when it comes to Ellard and Lewis. They're good enough. They've been in the discussion. The only way they're going to get, we know it's their last year as a modern candidate, right? So the only way they can get any advancement is to get in the 15, right? They got to get in the room. They have to have their cases presented, because that's the only shot they're going to get. And I think we need to be very careful with this idea. Well, they are Hall of Famers, and they're going to, if they fall in the seniors pool, right, and then Okay, well, then they're going to be among some of the most deserving senior pools. The seniors pool is still a pit of depth of just craziness, even with the 3 per year. And let's not get into that debate today, but it's just an observation. You have to be very careful, I think, if your mindset is, well, maybe they're not the 15, maybe they're 16 or 17. Oh, okay, well, okay, fine, they get in the seniors pool and it'll all work out. There's no assurances. Once they're in that senior pool, it's a rough hole. And I don't think we want to take the mindset that, well, okay, they're good enough, but not quite. The philosophy, if you believe in it, if you think there really are Hall of Famers, and I think a lot of us here would agree that Lewis and Ellard are of that caliber, they need to get in the 15. They need to have their cases presented, discussed by the full committee. Now, I don't know what their chances are, either one of them getting elected. It's a big leap, right, from 15 to 5. But if you're not in the discussion, you're not in the discussion. So for me, when it comes to these guys last year on the modern ballot, it's not every one of them, but if we are really thinking, there's again agreement that on the group they are, the only way to get that discussion going, and it would help them if they end up in a senior pool, and who knows, maybe they get in this year, is to get them in the 15. And so the strategy there, at least in my mind, is put them in so they have a chance, and then let the odds play out. Because if you don't, they aren't going anywhere for quite a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, it seems like this year there's really the push around Albert Lewis. You know, Tony Dungy's really spoken out for him this voting season. A lot of talk around him with not just being a shutdown corner, but also just being a special teams demon with, you know, the block kicks, the block punts. You know, Jerry Rice speaking out back when they played against each other, calling him one of the, if not the best cover corner that he ever faced. So I think there's a lot of groundswell around Albert Lewis to kind of elevate him this year, similar to some of the other final year candidates that have been in the past, and really seem to be like he's the one they're kind of coalescing around to try to elevate him and get his case heard.
I'll say two things. I'll say two things about Albert Lewis. First is I just want to note that Jerry Rice quote that's going around in the name of like getting our stats right or getting our facts right. The Jerry Rice quote, that one strikes me as weird. They only played twice. One of them was Jerry Rice's rookie year, and he didn't do much. And the other one was in '94, the game where Rice set the touchdown record and literally went over the top on Lewis to get the record. So I'm not really sure kind of where that quote materialized. I saw it from Turney, who got it from Peter King, and it feels like something that's kind of winding its way through the myth factory. But that's one aspect. Here's the other aspect, and this kind of goes to what Brian has said about special teamers and about Tasker and Bates. It kind of makes me, the whole Albert Lewis thing has made me feel, and I hate to say this, I love Steve Tasker because of the Bills and just his grit, and he went to Northwestern. But the fact that Albert Lewis is like the punt block god makes me kind of question my Tasker thing, and it makes me elevate Lewis because I'm like, holy hell, this guy was a shutdown corner and he was rocking like that in special teams. And I came from I grew, well, it was in my 20s. All the best players on the Lovey Bears also played special teams: Peanut Tillman and Brian Urlacher and Hunter Hillmeyer, Lance Briggs and Alex Brown. So I like that kind of thing. And it just made me rethink a little bit, like the Tasker bit, where I was like, holy shit, in other words, is Albert Lewis a Pro Bowl corner plus Steve Tasker?
Yes, and more. Because what he did on special teams was even more impactful. And it feels like for us, what we're doing in our process, I'm trying to be conscientious, Jack, and like I think about what Paul and Chris said. I'm not trying to be like sympathy votes. Oh, it's their last round in the modern pool, we should automatically advance them. It feels like we are making an appropriate course correction of where these guys realistically should be in the process for a variety of different factors. I'd certainly say that for Albert Lewis, and I think there's a strong case to make for Henry Ellard as well, that we're not making a sympathy push here. We're saying there's a time box, certainly, but there's more than that. There is a they have not been as respected as much in the process, and probably even in our process, right? Like I think about Albert Lewis wasn't even a conversation last year for us. I can't recall. This
Albert
year,
Lewis wasn't in discussion last year. We have done Ellert, but we never did Lewis.
yeah, that's what I'm just thinking. Like it feels like to us, we are entertaining, a course correction that is necessary based off of the merits of their cases.
Yeah, I mean, these players haven't really changed in 10 years. Had they been talked about 10 years ago, who knows where they'd be in the process by now. They may have been in the 15 already a couple times, and now they're moving up that ladder there. So it's good that they get their chance here finally, but it'd be nice if they got it a couple of years earlier.
So we've got two more people here in this little bunch, three more, excuse me. And one of them is Pat Swilling, get to him in a second. One of them is Tom Nalen. I think we've all seen the effectiveness of Tom's, what's up, shout out to Tom, of Tom's case that he made for Tom Nalen a few years ago. To me, the interesting bit with Tom Nalen is the way that centers have really been spaced out like almost a decade apart, where you got, Matthews, who's done it all, Dawson, and then it's Malai, right?
Yeah,
Or am I
DeMont
missing-
Dawson,
yeah.
Malai. And then I think before that you get to Webster. I mean,
You get Webster, exactly. Yeah. So we know that Mangold is going to make his way in, and I think the question here is, should there be another center in between them? I think so. I mean, I think that offensive line, if you think about the nature of the game, offensive line as far as offensive players, the offensive line is the only position that is actually doing the stated purpose of their job every snap and doing it at the highest level. So I think that for the just as what Paul was talking about, if you want to look at like we need to get certain guys up, I do think I think it's important to say, what, Tom Nalen is the next center and he should be in there. I think we all know the case. Randall, Jeff.
Yeah. So when you think about Randall Cunningham, and I know we've had this conversation, I love the conversation around him. I think like we could get into the argument of the statistics and so forth, but you got to look bigger picture here. When we talk about all of these names on the list, every single one of them, like these are indisputable facts here. There's only one of these guys that at a time was the biggest star in the league, or you could argue was the biggest star in the league. I certainly would say like he was the biggest star in the league. There's only one of these guys that finished as a runner-up 3 times for the AP MVP. Jack, I know always loves the soundbite, and it's appropriate, right? You look at that 1998 season, the one season he actually had a great supporting cast around him in Minnesota. He was even a different player, and what did he do? He won the players' version of the MVP award over Terrell Davis, who's in Canton, who had a 2,000-yard season. You talk about this is the guy, the only one on our list that played the most important position in the game, even when we're talking about the 90s and the 80s, still the most important position in the game. One of the weakest supporting cast when you talk about quarterbacks, compare him to other peers like Troy Aikman, Jim Kelly, Warren Moon. Troy Aikman had, in terms of just offensive Pro Bowlers around him, a total of 43 throughout his career. Warren Moon had 32. Jim Kelly had 23. Randall Cunningham had 11. It's partially reflected in why he finished so high so often in the MVP voting, because he had to do so much with so little around him, not to mention the fact that his 2 primary coaches in Philadelphia were terrible for him on the offensive side of the ball in terms of Buddy Ryan, and then you talk about Rich Kotite. And it feels like we always acknowledge how terrible Rich Kotite was, but it doesn't help Randall Cunningham's case in terms of that was his offensive coordinator, later his head coach, and these were the things that he did in spite of the circumstances around him.
And also don't forget the 3 Burt Bell Awards. Only 3 guys in history to have that being Johnny Unitas, Peyton Manning, and Randall Cunningham. That alone makes me believe he's a Hall of Famer. And that's, for those that don't know, Burt Bell, that's the MVP voted on by, I think, like the coaches in the front offices. Yeah, he's definitely a Hall of Famer in my eyes, and a huge snub, easily the most deserving of all the quarterbacks.
When we look at today's game and we look at the number of quarterbacks in recent years that have played prominent roles, you can feel different ways about different players, but you talk about the Deshaun Watson types, you talk about the Lamar Jackson types, you talk about the Jalen Hurtses, the Justin Fields, and so forth. Russell Wilson, in his Seattle days, we're not going to mention the Denver time, but in the Seattle days, his ability to scramble and move around, like that running ability. it all comes back to the evolution of the game that was helped advance significantly by Randall Cunningham. Michael Vick isn't the number one overall pick in 2001 if it wasn't for Randall Cunningham. So when we talk about guys that impacted the game, it is the goddamn Hall of Fame. And you're talking about impact, star power, meaning, it's Randall Cunningham.
Right on, man. Right on.
Well done.
Yep.
So we got a bit, I guess, on Pat Swilling. I guess as a Saints guy, I'll just sort of like go in a little bit. Sam Mills took his spot. Sam Mills had the better story. Pat Swilling was the better player.
So Kirk, that's actually what I want to ask you, because now Swilling is going to hit this problem of how can you, we always talk about how can you put in 4 Tampa Bay Bucks defenders on a team that only won 1 title? Well, how can you put in 3 linebackers?
Just linebackers from that team.
Because when you look at when the Saints finally broke through, it took forever. I wish Ryan was here because I know he's the other Saints fan.
Right.
And he could I'm sure he would back me up on this. Look, there was virtually no offense for New Orleans forever. I mean, I know they consider Archie Manning beloved there, but Archie Manning was not that good. When you look back at it, he wasn't. No. Yeah, he had nothing to work with, but he didn't elevate anyone either. In terms of when the Saints finally got over the hump and finally were doing something, it was all based on their defense. Mills got the whole keep pounding thing and everything he did in Carolina, which was a miraculous time when you're watching Carolina and Jacksonville, for that matter, get into the conference finals second year. In their second year of existence. I mean, that was unprecedented, unheard of. And Sam Mills was the heart of that, but he wasn't the heart of what New Orleans was trying to do on an abysmal team for that era. So Pat Swilling is somebody that I feel very passionate about. I think the same way that I guess the Broncos fans sort of feel about Tom Nalen as we're sort of going through here, just an underappreciated person on a mediocre team. And we're not saying anything about how Joe Thomas will go in probably in the first year with the worst record ever of any Hall of Famer.
Yeah, and I guess the one counter I would have to Pat Swilling, and I would agree, like when I look at some of the other players, like I don't see where he and like a James Harrison is so different. And I mean that to say like why James Harrison is a first ballot semifinalist for the official one, but Pat Swilling can't even cut the mustard. The only challenge I would throw out there for Pat Swilling is just the one. He had 2 years in the middle of his career when he left New Orleans. He went to Detroit. He wasn't very good. Like he just wasn't. Then he went to Oakland. He had a couple of rebound years. I think he had like a 13 sack season his first year in Oakland, but he had that couple of years in Detroit, like right in the peak of his career when he got away from the Dome Patrol, that he wasn't the Pat Swilling that dominated in New Orleans.
Well, and that's completely fair. And I wouldn't even disagree on that. I admit my hometown bias on this one, or my home team bias.
Yeah, there's a big hometown bias from Canada to New Orleans. So
from Montreal to Memphis, parlez-vous français.
Yeah, nice.
Oui, monsieur.
Okay.
Oui. Give a bit of maple syrup on your poutine while you're at it.
Will, you have something to say? You were muted.
Just quickly on Pat Swilling, I think what hurts him for me in this voting that we're doing tonight is he was a great player. No one's arguing that. He is probably the 3rd or 4th best player at his position that's in these finalists, in these semifinals. So I mean, that hurts his cause a little bit.
He also did win Defensive Player of the Year, which is, although James Harrison did as well, and he didn't get anything as they're going through this. I mean, but that's something that neither of the other guys on his linebacking court did do.
And James Harrison, though, was the most dominant player on his team that was a dominant defense, unlike Swilling, who was maybe the 2nd or 3rd best player on that team. That's all I would say.
Fair enough.
No, I don't think that is something that people. I don't think that's a roundly held opinion here. I would disagree with that. I think the whole point I was making about Swilling is that I did view him as the best defender on that team. And Ricky Jackson had the benefit, of course, of having a longer career prior than going to San Francisco. Sam Mills has the benefit of, I think, maybe a renewed interest in his USFL years, obviously the life story of him and everything there. Pat Swilling winning Defensive Player of the Year and doing it at a position where you still had Lawrence Taylor in 1991 as an excellent player and Derek Thomas as an absolute terror. For Pat Swilling to then go in and do that, I would put Pat Swilling as the #1 defender on that team. I would.
All right, can we move on just because I don't want to
Yes.
keep going. We've had at least had a chance to talk about everybody.
Yep.
All right,
Yes,
so next up we're in the
absolutely.
nines and eights. Can you guys see this yet? Yes.
No, not yet.
All right, sorry, it's taking some time.
Spitting,
That's
spitting,
okay.
You're
spitting.
seducing us.
I have it
Evan.
memorized.
There it is. Participants can now see my application. So Richmond,
Reggie Wayne. Let's
Richmond
go.
Webb, Reggie Wayne, and Leslie
Leslie
O'Neal.
O'Neal.
It's nice to see him that high. So
Great to see him
anybody
that
have anything to say on these three?
I was surprised
Positive
the
or
team was so low.
Yeah, I'll start with Reggie Wayne, and again, I'll just try to be brief. You just look at his numbers. I know he was opposite Marvin Harrison for all those years. Obviously, had a good quarterback, but just produced for a long career. Put up all the numbers matching other Hall of Famers, and was certainly a guy that the defenses had to respect and just feel like he's not. And I agree, we got a glut of wide receivers, so I recognize that. I'm obviously an Andre Johnson supporter as well as Henry Ellard. I try not to put too much position into it at this point, but I was the advocate for him in one of the finals a couple of years ago. So big Reggie Wayne fan. I think he's in the path to get in. It may not be this year, but I think he at least deserves to be in the 15.
Dave,
Yeah,
based off
my
Go ahead.
thing with Reggie Wayne, he doesn't really move me. I kind of feel similarly to him as I do to Zach Thomas. And it's not like a Colts Bears Super Bowl 41 thing. I don't know. He seems like a really nice guy. He obviously had an incredible career, and he's going in the Hall of Fame. He was a first ballot finalist, so he is going in, and I won't stop him. My thing here is again about the numbers. I mean, it all depends on how you rate the wide receivers. And I look at Andre Johnson, the cases we've talked about him. Whoever it was it Evan who was saying Torrey Holt? I'm a big Torrey Holt guy. I would have had Torrey Holt in before Isaac Bruce as well. Okay, so now that's two. If you think Ellard is going in or should, now that's three. And at three, that's a fifth of your finalist pack already, 3 out of 15.
And it doesn't
So-
even get to Steve Smith.
So we haven't even gotten to Steve Smith. We haven't gotten to Hines Ward, who's now what, a 7th year semifinalist every year of his eligibility. So my thing with Wayne is that it is much easier, and this is something we've talked about, it is much easier to look at wide receivers and say, oh, well, he had, these benchmarks, 10,000 yards or 80 touchdowns or this many 1,000-yard seasons. And that's something that we don't have with Richmond Webb, who I'll talk about in a second, Steve Wisniewski, Ruben Brown. So my thing with Reggie Wayne would be he's going to get in. He doesn't need to be on the 15 right now. Now, if the committee handled it in that way and they weren't worried about, this is Q and this is, we got to make sure that this person, then I think that it wouldn't be a big deal if Reggie Wayne wasn't a finalist for his first 3 years, which he has been. I would leave him out right now because of a numbers game with wide receivers. I just wouldn't put him ahead of Johnson, Holt, or Ellard for the 15 where you want to be able to talk about him again. And I don't need 4 of my 15 finalists to be at the same position.
Can I just pivot to talk about Leslie O'Neal? Because
Yes.
he's in this range. When I look at Leslie O'Neal, like he is one of the criminally underrated players that is eligible here. And we talk about like Jared Allen's got more votes than Leslie O'Neal. Personally, I think that's a crock of shit. You're talking about a guy that had 7 seasons where he had 12 plus sacks, including, I think it was a season of 17 sacks, 8 total seasons.
17.
Yep. Eight total seasons of 10 plus sacks. He was a 6-time Pro Bowler. I think he was like 2-time or 1-time AP2.
3 times.
3 times. Thank you. So when I think about Leslie O'Neal, he was the guy on defense in San Diego before Junior Seau was there. And as much as Junior Seau got the attention, and maybe a little bit later, Mims got some attention too, like Leslie O'Neal was a stud. And you think about that 94 Chargers team that went to the Super Bowl, and freaking Stan Humphries at quarterback, Marion Butts and Natron Means, like Alfred Papunu. You didn't think I was going to bring that up in a Hall of Fame conversation today. I did. The point I'm getting at is when you look at some of these other edge rushers, some of these other defensive linemen, Leslie O'Neal, like even when you go back in the mid-90s, Jack had an interesting find. I think it was a Sports Illustrated poll in the mid-90s. And Leslie O'Neal was one of the higher rated, like in that poll of these are guys that might end up in Canton someday.
Yeah,
And
they pulled all the Hall of Fame. SI
Yeah.
pulled all the Hall of Fame voters right at the start of the 95 season.
Yeah.
And
So
Leslie
when-
O'Neal was like middle of the pack.
Just
which was in the middle of his career. So I just wanted to call out here, like he was a rookie of the year. He had a 12 and a half sack season as a rookie. There was consistent excellence at his position for an extended period of time. And I look at guys like Jared Allen, I don't think they had that. When I look at some of these other players relative to their position, I think Leslie O'Neal's numbers as a defensive end hold up better than some of these other guys.
The other thing too with Leslie O'Neal is he lost his sophomore year. He missed a whole year with injury, came back and then had all those consistent 10, 12 plus seasons of sacks. So he really, had to fight through an injury to get to where he got to. So a lot of players aren't able to do that, but he did.
And just a quick piggyback, a very all-around player compared to a lot of pass rushers who are known for their sack numbers. And yes, he has 130 sacks or whatever, but he was a very good player against a run in an era where that was maybe even more important than it is now for edge rushers. And just quickly on his only, second team All-Pro, the other guys who were on the All-Pro teams in those 3 years where he made second team, Lawrence Taylor, Bruce Smith, Charles Haley, Chris Dolman, Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, and Richard Dent. That's all.
Hey, Ron, do you have something?
Yeah, I just had a comment, and it kind of dovetails what you're talking about, that player with San Diego, whether you're talking about Andre Johnson or any of the guys kind of on the borderline of things, in terms of our voting. Take a step back and just say, like Leslie O'Neal, you're giving examples that hit the mark on this. Was a player dominant? Was this a guy who, like, every week the opponent game plan had to be specific to stopping that person and mitigating that person? I think it's really important to look at, the wow factor. I mean, I know Deion Sanders had some interesting comments a few years ago about the Hall of Fame, but that was his thing, is like, look at it. Was this player great? Was this player like top of the mountain or just really good? And I think Leslie O'Neal, I mean, the guy just dominated, but he played for the Chargers. He didn't play for the Jets.
And it impacted Ron. It was impacted in part because he played alongside Junior Seau in the 90s. And Junior Seau, and deservedly so, right? Junior Seau was an absolute monster. He was a freak.
Last year player.
One note on Leslie O'Neal, while we talk about Lewis and Ellard and Swilling as being in their 20th year, O'Neal's in his 19th. It's not that much different. So kind of some of those same rules apply. You don't move O'Neal along now, you're gonna be having the same conversation, and all of a sudden he's gonna be the 20-year, let's make it happen guy. So to be considered. Anything else on Leslie O'Neal? Otherwise, I want to say something about Richmond Webb.
Oh, go right ahead with Webb.
I've made myself known as a Richmond Webb guy, and I've learned a lot about Webb even just from reading Brian's breakdowns. My feeling here is that I think that you can take distance from someone's career to get better perspective on it in a way that bumps them historically, but I don't think you should really be doing that in a way that harms them historically. Richmond Webb was the first, let me make sure I get it exactly. He was the first left tackle to be voted a Pro Bowl starter. This was when fans were not yet voting for the Pro Bowl. They didn't start voting until 93. This was 1990. He was the first rookie offensive tackle to make the Pro Bowl since the merger. He was the first rookie left tackle to make the Pro Bowl since 1955. And he was in the Pro Bowl for each of his first 7 seasons. He was an All-Pro for 4 straight seasons. He was 1990s All-Decade. He was very clearly one of the defining people at his position. And this will dovetail into the Willie Anderson conversation a little bit later, but directly dovetailing with it is that when the Bengals were looking for a new left tackle, they went out and signed an older Richmond Webb rather than moving, and there were some contract issues there were some money issues, but rather than moving Willie Anderson over to left tackle. And I now have been convinced that Willie Anderson is a Hall of Famer. We can get to him and blah, blah, blah. But I do think that there should be a progression here. And again, we're talking about 20 years. We're talking about 19 years. Well, Richmond Webb is in his 16th year, and he has never been a semifinalist. And if you had told me in 1999 that Richmond Webb would be in his 16th season, never been a semifinalist, much less a finalist, to be able to be in that conversation. I'd have told you were nuts. The world exploded. The simulation went haywire, et cetera, et cetera. So Richmond Webb is someone who I feel very strongly about, and he is another reason why I would not include another wide receiver if it's going to knock off some of these offensive linemen whose all-pro and Pro Bowl accolades were through the roof.
And Jack, if I may, on Richmond Webb, you brought up Willie Anderson, so I think it's like an appropriate distinction because I think Willie Anderson was in the 7th, so it kind of blends right in. Richmond Webb doesn't have a stat that he put out there to artificially elevate his own case. Willie Anderson does.
And he won't either. He won't.
Right.
That's not who he is. Evan and I, we got the pleasure of actually getting to know him a little bit. Just clouds my judgment a bit, but great guy. But yeah, go on.
So when I talk about the actual football matters here, Richmond Webb played left tackle at the highest of levels for an extended period of time, to what Jack is talking about. Willie Anderson was a very, very good right tackle, but there is clearly a difference. And that's not an opinion. That is decades of evidence that points to NFL teams traditionally take left tackles much higher than right tackles. It's why they talk about in the draft process, even to this day, when the logic doesn't hold as much water, that, hey, we got to prioritize left tackle versus right tackle. There's a reason Willie Anderson didn't play left tackle. He was a better run blocker than he was a pass protector. And on those Bengals teams, like what Jack brought up, there's a reason they would keep bringing in other guys to play on that side of the ball. They did not move Willie Anderson over there. Richmond Webb was able to hold up on the blind side. That's why left tackles get paid more. In that era especially, they would more often than not face the best edge rusher because that would be the right defensive end or the right outside linebacker. So I think when you look at Richmond Webb and his accomplishments, to me, it clearly distinguishes him from a Willie Anderson. I'm not a never Willie Anderson guy. I think it is there's no reason other than the bullshit stat that he put out himself that he has gotten this far in the process and is probably going to end up with the voters as a top 15 guy again. And I'm kind of glad to see that we are making a bit of a stand here and say maybe someday, but not right now.
Yeah, one stat that we do have on Richmond Webb, 1990, his rookie year, Bruce Smith was Defensive Player of the Year. He had 19 sacks. He had 0 sacks against Richmond Webb, and that was in 3 games, including a playoff game. And that is a stat that we have.
And not that we hold that much weight with the all-decade teams, but there are only 3 offensive linemen left in that 90s team who are not in. I don't think Stepnoski's ever getting in at center, but one is Richmond Webb, and the other is, we're coming up to him, Steve Wisniewski.
Yep.
At number 7, which is as good a segue as I am ever going to get. So we're just going to move on. Because I think we did a pretty good job with that. So Wisniewski and Anderson at 7. Neil Smith also made the all-decade team over Leslie O'Neal. Kevin Williams and Darren Woodson at 6. We all know where I'm going with this in a second. Does anyone have anything about Wisniewski, Anderson, Smith, or Woodson before Kevin Williams?
I think we did a good bit on Anderson. I think right now with Wisniewski, I think he's been criminally overlooked. And yes, he's been a semifinalist before, but when is the last time that we've ever seen a Raider get this much or this lack of play in terms of push?
I can tell you this from personal experience as someone who has worked with, people that cover letters, Zenny Abraham, amazing dude. And also one of the people that we work with, Bill Carroll, awesome, amazing guy. Violator, he's come on, and I've actually asked him why Steve Wisniewski, and I think you have asked him as well, as why Wisniewski compared to other Raiders of the past, like a Lester Hayes or a Jim Plunkett or even an Howard Powell, why do they get more attention than someone like a Steve Wisniewski? I think even seeing a Greg Townsend get more attention than Wisniewski. And he said that Townsend compared to Wisniewski was much more approachable with the fans, whereas Wisniewski, he was never really a rah-rah guy. He was always someone that just came to work every day and did his job in all-pro level. He is the only guard left of the 1990s all-decade team, and Wisniewski was also someone who was an 8-time Pro Bowler as well as a 8-time All-Pro. 2 of them first team, the other 6 were second team. And during those 90s, Wisniewski was consistently viewed as the stalwart of that Raiders offensive line. And in my opinion, I think he's a massive, massive, massive snub. The fact that he's only been a semifinalist only once in this entire tenure. It's criminally overlooked, and I don't understand why. I think also too with him is because he retired. The final game of his career was, what was the Tuck Rule game? He didn't.
Tuck Rule game, yeah.
It's sort of like it's sort of like Bruce Armstrong, in which his final year was the year before the Patriots won the Super Bowl. Well, in this case, Steve Wisniewski's final year was the year before the Raiders went to the Super Bowl. Same thing with Randall McDaniel. Similar situation, which is why he ended up getting overlooked.
By the way, Vinny, I would like to I'm impressed by your powers. You mentioned Bill Carroll and he arrives. So
he has been summoned and introduced.
Wow.
I figured that's why Jack threw up the
I've been
jazz.
summoned.
That was it.
That's
I
awesome.
I was waving to Bill.
Listen, I told you my powers are big. I got Brian to see his face, and we got Bill to come at the same exact.
Wow.
Brian, speaking of Brian, can you weigh in at all about Wisniewski? Like, I feel like you've had some things to say about him, because you look at some of the resume, like from the honors standpoint. I think Vinny did a good job of like enunciating like how high those are, but do the merits or the awards, I should say, the accolades, do they match the performance in the player?
I don't personally view Wisniewski as a Hall of Fame caliber player. I look at him as a Ring of Honor, Hall of Very Good type guy. He has, if you just look at his postseason honors, he looks like an obvious Hall of Famer. Kind of like Shane Leckler, another Raider who has too many postseason honors. But from watching him play, I just never saw a Hall of Fame player other than when he played Cortez Kennedy. He did better against Kennedy than pretty much anyone else did. But in most games, he was a vicious guy. He treated every play like a knife fight. But he had more highlight reel type blocks than, I would say, steady consistency. And for me personally, I prefer steady consistency from an offensive lineman rather than being able to knock a guy out of the picture and then whiff on the next play. And that's kind of what I got from Wisniewski.
Thank you, Brian. That's helpful context.
Hmm.
I got a question for Ron. Ron, you there?
Powers don't work as well as mine, Jeff.
Fuck you.
So
Ron, Ron doesn't make me go away. No, I was going to talk about Neil Smith really quickly.
Yes.
And when I think about, somebody talked about the eyeball test. That might have been you, Dave. I think you were talking about another player.
Yeah.
It was talking about the eyeball test. And I think about the eyeball test and I think about Neil Smith. Like, there was a reason, as a defensive end playing in Kansas City, even as a teammate of Derek Thomas, this guy was being featured in Chunky Soup commercials and those types of things in the 90s. And he had some like mainstream appeal, like seriously, because it was a reflection of the type of player that he was. This was one of the preeminent defensive ends of his time. I think that's reflected in the fact that he was on the all-decade team. Maybe he doesn't have some of the sack numbers, but I think Will did a good job of talking about like the importance of, we talk about Leslie O'Neal and the ability to have the all-around game versus just being one-dimensional. Thank you, Kirk. Getting all done with. But when we talk about Neil Smith, this was a guy that was a preeminent player at his position in the 90s on some great defenses in Kansas City. And I wanted to ask you, Ron, like, it often gets forgotten about just how big of a deal it was after the 96 playoff debacle against Jacksonville, that when Broncos went into free agency that offseason, their big target realistically was Neil Smith.
It was a title swinger.
It was a title swinger. Like, it was a massive move. And you look at those 2 years and you say, 97 was really good. The 98 sack totals aren't as great, but he was a big addition to two championship team defenses. So Ron, I don't know, like, as a, like, he was an opponent and then he's like, comes over and now you love him. Like, can you talk a little bit about him?
Oh, sure. And don't forget, remember Keith Traylor? I'm not pitching him for the Hall of Fame, but they both came over and they really solidified that defensive line along with Alfred Williams. You know, a lot of people that Mike Shanahan spent a lot of money on and later was told that it wasn't within the rules. But you know, Neil Smith was dominant on the defensive line. And he was a guy who, again, the eyeball test, you know, you got to figure out where he is at all times. or he's going to wreck your run game or pass game or whatever.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Neil's never even been a semifinalist, has he? I don't think so.
No, he never has yet.
Okay.
Wow.
And that feels like that's a reflection of like the slightly lower sack numbers. And I think that's one of the challenges we see with the defensive ends. Like he doesn't have a stupid haircut and do a stupid dance that people actually like a Jared Allen. No, so seriously,
Jared Allen.
So it's like he doesn't get the same type of buzz, but in his time he did. And it's weird, like sometimes absence of career, it grows a mythology around a player. But Neil Smith is one of those cases where it feels like his profile has decreased, his legend has decreased after his playing career. And I've never understood that. I don't get it because he even has the 2 championship rings from Denver.
Right. Just so we keep moving, does anyone have anything to say on Darren Woodson?
Paul, do you have anything to say?
Well, I was just kind of looking at some of the positions. We talked about this a little bit, right? So we have a lot of wide receivers, and then you got a bunch of linebackers, right? We have some cornerbacks. We have some defensive ends. We're covering a lot of positions that we're kind of thinking about moving in forward. And so when I think about this, I think about you also have other positions, and we talked about guard. We're going to come up with another guard here in a few minutes. So for Woodson, he is, right, this highly ranked safety. The Hall has elected a lot of his peers. I think going back to what Jeff just said a minute ago, you get players who get lost because there's so many of them in the position. The Hall went through a series, right, where they elected a lot of pass rushing linebackers and defensive ends. And a guy like O'Neal, in the case with Woodson with the safeties, they just get buried behind all of that. And all of a sudden, the voters sort of have this view like, okay, we've managed to fix that. Let's move on, right? And then they leave these guys behind. And Woodson's an example. You know, whether he makes the 15 or not, he's got to make it's his time to move up. You know, his peers have been elected. He has a lot of the accolades. He has a lot of the testimonials. I think he looks pretty good on film. He played with the dynasty. He checks all those boxes, and he's a safety position that's largely been ignored by the voters. We have a safety. You know, he needs to be thought of, again, 15 or close to it, so that we get this mix of positions. Let's not, you know, as we've talked about on and on again, too many wide receivers, right? We have to get some of the guys in the discussion because all the positions are valued. They all should be considered. And the voters for all too long have ignored interior linemen and safeties. So Woodson deserves to have his case heard. It's as simple as that.
Here's the question I have for Darren Woodson is I would argue that maybe that great Cowboys defense of the 90s is underrepresented with the Hall of Fame. So I'm trying to balance that versus I struggle with him versus Tim McDonald because I personally think Tim McDonald was better. There were more splash plays, more impact plays. And if Tim McDonald played for the Dallas Cowboys in the 90s for his entire career, like Darren Woodson got to do, he'd probably already be in Canton, or to your point, he'd be like the next safety up, right? And that's the struggle I have with Woodson. Like I personally would put Tim McDonald next in line among the safety class. It's not me trying to stand in the way of Darren Woodson, like being in the top 15, because to your point, he's really like the unique outlier here. Like when we have him and Harrison are the only 2 safeties, I think. But I just struggle to think like, is he really in that class or was he even the best one, the next one up?
Can I just throw a number for Darren Woodson? It's one of those like calling card numbers.
Right.
All-time leader in tackles for a Dallas Cowboy player.
Oh, wow.
Didn't know about that.
1300 or 1360 or something like that. Yeah. That's
thought it'd
pretty
be someone like-
impressive,
Yeah,
no
that's
matter
a-
how you get there.
We thought it'd be someone like Lily or something.
But I'm just trying to think through like tackles are important, right, Will? But I'm also thinking like sacks and interceptions and forced fumbles. And if Tim McDonald created more like game breaking plays where Darren Woodson, I would agree, like he was a stud. He was incredibly solid. He was a great all around, like in the box safety, but he was good in coverage too. I struggle with that. Like I hold Hugh McDonald like in a better light. And if he spent more time in San Francisco than just the 94 and like season and then the last stretch of his career, I think he would already be in or close to it.
I think the Woodson debate is a good one. I think it's a fair, valid one. But who's on the list that we're talking about, right? I mean, do you hold back Woodson because you have feelings about another player, but he's not in our. I mean, I get where you're going, Jeff. It's a good comparison. A little different play. Woodson also had I think a fairly good career after the Super Bowl. He stayed. He was fairly consistent. But I get the debate. But at this point, he's our safety, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
looking at years, Darren Woodson is in his 15th season, and what Paul said about his time to advance, he was first in the semis in year 7, then he was off a year, he was back in year 9, then he was off a year, which is rare, then he was back in year 11, and now he's been in the semis 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So he's got only 5 years remaining. I've come around on Tim McDonald. I'm a huge Darren Woodson guy. Tim McDonald only has 1 more year. It's too bad he's not here for us to talk about, but he's not here for us to talk about. And Darren Woodson is.
Can I say something about Darren Woodson? I think it's very interesting that there's been no Hall of Famers elected from the 1992 NFL draft, and I think he's like the only one I can think of that actually has a case or has a chance of getting in. I can't think of that of any other draft class, at least in the modern time.
Yeah, same thing. Same thing. I was gonna say that. Same thing, Alec. I was gonna say that it's kind of funny how that draft in particular, like the only one I could really think of that could have a case outside of Darren Woodson would be Troy Vincent, but similar situation. Like with Tim McDonald, he's not here, so might as well not even talk about him. But I do agree that Darren Woodson does have the best chance out of anyone from that draft class.
So in the interest of time, and because I'm shaking in my room here, the last person we have to talk about is Kevin Williams, who 16 of you are just wrong on. So I want to start this by saying that I am a Patriots fan. Here we go. I have no money on Kevin Williams. I have Vince Wilfork on this list as someone we could have voted for. And as you can tell, I did not vote for him because Kevin Williams is the most dominant person at his position available to vote for. Out of all of these people, there's no one more dominant at their position on this entire list than Kevin Williams. How do I back that up? So Kevin Williams, do you know how many interior defensive linemen have at least 100 sacks in their career?
The one I can think of is like maybe like Aaron Donald.
Aaron Donald just got his 100th. The only other one is Chris Dolman. Number
John Randall too. Didn't he have that?
I'm sorry, John. Well, John Randall was in and out, but okay, fine. The only at 98 for someone who played their entire career is Kevin Williams, and he not only was he great at that, he was the anchor of one of the best running defenses historically, the 4th best defense adjusted for era in the history of the NFL. They had a 3-year period where the running defense for the Vikings in 2003, 2004, 2005 allowed on average 3.1 yards a carry. In 2003, they allowed 2.9 yards a carry, right? The lowest ever. And he was a 5-time first-team All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler. Now, again, he got caught in star caps, which I've been on record as saying is the stupidest. Again, a Patriots fan, we're all about conspiracy theories. There is no thing in the history of the NFL that's stupider than star caps, right? They asked the NFL what supplements to take. The NFL told them what supplements to take, and then the supplements had crap in them. And then the NFL suspended them for taking the supplements that the NFL told them to take, right? That's star caps. So I don't know if that counts against him. He also is not anywhere on social media. He's not on Twitter. He's not on Facebook. He's not on Instagram. He's not on anything. So that may have something to do with it as well. But if you go through, and again, everyone has their own way of doing things. You can think of however you want. Pro Football Reference has their rankings, a Hall of Fame monitor they have for them. He is, according to the 9th greatest defensive tackle of all time. The only people better than him are Bob Lilly, Randy White, Alan Page, Aaron Donald, Joe Green, John Randall, Warren Sapp, Merlin Olsen. He's ahead of Cortez Kennedy, Henry Johnson, Alex Karras, Buck Buchanan, Bryant Young. He's significantly ahead of Bryant Young, who was elected last year. Like, it's not even close, right? Average Hall of Famer is 100 on their score. He's 105. Bryant Young's a 64. So I didn't think I would come into this 3 years ago being the biggest Kevin Williams stan on the internet, but Kevin Williams is the most dominant defensive tackle available for us to vote for, regardless of who it is. He dominates Wilfork. To Wilfork's like at 58, right? He deserves to be here. If we're looking for Paul, you're talking about positional difference. He's the only defensive tackle we have here to even look at, and he's way better than 6 out of 22.
I would ask you this, Evan, like, or maybe I'll say this, is when I think about Kevin Williams, had to see him twice a year, at a minimum.
And
Like,
it sucked.
And it sucked, right? Like when I think about Jared Allen, I keep bringing him up, but like, it's again, like that's where the media attention went. But as like a football fan and paying attention to this stuff, Kevin Williams was the one that concerned me in terms of his ability to both get into the backfield and disrupt the passing game and the running game as well. Now I will call out, like, he also played next to Pat Williams for several years. Like that certainly didn't hurt the run defense.
The Williams wall, we're not going to get both of them in, and Kevin's the one
Yeah,
who's
so
get the more accolades.
Right.
I'm pointing out like that, like I think there are some flaws with that Pro Football Reference Hall of Fame monitor that you're talking about, and like how it rates the adjusted values and so forth, and can like over reward for the team success. But when I look at Kevin Williams, he was the player on those Vikings defenses that concerned me the most, and frankly, it was Antoine Winfield second, if I'm going to go there. But Kevin Williams, went to your point about, like, I always looked at Kevin Williams as being the foundation of those Minnesota defenses that were great against the run. He was the guy that if he didn't play well, they didn't play as well, where you could take somebody else out, with bad hair, and they could still be a good defense.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just crazy that, out of all people, Evan, who's from Massachusetts, would become the big Kevin Williams fan. Did you ever envision that ahead of time? Who did you think would be your Kevin Williams ahead of this anyway?
Who in the heck was that too? He only had 63 sacks, by the
Oh,
way.
I'm sorry, he had 63 sacks. Where did I get 98? You know what? I screwed that up, guys.
No, you didn't. You're taking the Willie Anderson approach to advancing Kevin Williams.
No,
case.
that's
First for the other.
The answer is I read it wrong somewhere and wrote it down wrong. So I apologize. You're right. He only does have 63. My bad. That's 100% my bad, guys. I had this all
Thanks,
prepared.
Will. Keep us honest, bro.
Do you think this happens in real life and then somebody gets womp womp, or just totally
I screwed up. I was still putting this together at work in between meetings. So
It's okay. Don't worry. It happens to the best of us.
Well, I have nothing else to do, and I screw up all the time, as Evan can tell you.
yeah, sorry guys. But anyway, everything else I said.
Alan took the rest. Love it.
All right.
Thank you, Will, for pointing that out on the chat before someone else point out in real life.
So what's our next crew?
Our next group, we should get to that part so we can actually get to the voting part.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be new. This is
vote.
going to be news to some folks here. So, Bill, here it's your first time seeing it. So Jari Evans and London Fletcher have 5, Sean Alexander, Ruben Brown, and Ricky Waters have 4. Or do we just kind of want to run through the 3s and 2s as well in case there's any?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's talk about the running backs first, only because we got 3 running backs and we haven't talked about any of them yet.
So let's just get the other ones announced here. So 3 for Eric Allen, 3 for James Harrison, 3 for Robert Mathis, 3 for Steve Smith, 3 for Fred Taylor. We know who's talk about Fred Taylor. We'll get to that in a second. 2 for Ben Coates and 2 for Rodney Harrison. So the pity Patriots on the end here. So
Penny Patriots.
Hopefully someone's going to give the Patriots a chance one day. But anyway.
Yeah, not in the Hall of Fame. We got to elect every Colts player who got beaten by them routinely. So
never made much sense to me. I'm one of the biggest supporters of all those Patriots as the next guy of anyone here probably.
Should we do this by position? Because I think Evan, you mentioned maybe we just do this by the 3 remaining running backs.
So the 3 running backs, of course, here are Sean Alexander, Ricky Waters, and Fred Taylor.
I'd like to talk about Ricky Waters.
I'll start on Sean
Alexander.
Jack. I'll start on Sean Alexander. Sean Alexander is someone who I have felt very strongly about. I'm a big peak guy, and Sean Alexander won an MVP at a time when LaDainian Tomlinson was at his peak at the same position. Sean Alexander has 100 career rushing touchdowns. Now, I know it's been pointed out in the group, well, so many of these were 1 yards. I don't give a shit. He got him in. I know who he was running behind. I know the offensive lineman. I know the whole thing. I don't think you can pick apart 100 touchdowns and nitpick 100 touchdowns. Also, one of my favorite players was Matt Forte. And one of the big things that we always talked about Matt Forte was, gosh, I wish Matt Forte was a little bit better around the goal line. Well, here's a dude who was great around the goal line. I do recall talking to, I was doing an interview with Hunter Hillenmeyer. I was talking to him about Adrian Peterson because Hunter had had a lot of success on Adrian Peterson. He'd forced, I think, 3 fumbles in their 2 games in 2009. And he was talking about the same thing, the idea that you have to game plan for Adrian Peterson, that it's, 11 heads to the ball. And I was naming some other running backs, and I said, what about Sean Alexander? And he said, Sean Alexander was tough, but he was kind of just, his words were just the guy. The idea being that Sean Alexander kind of did one thing, and he did it very well, but it was straight ahead. He wasn't going to bounce outside. He wasn't going to, catch the football. Like, he was kind of doing one thing. Who am I to disagree with fucking Hunter Hillenmeyer, who, started a Super Bowl, who filled in for Brian Urlacher in 2009. I'm not here to disagree other than to say that, I don't know, man, 100 touchdowns, an MVP, 1,800 rush yards, a touchdown record at the time in 2005, which Tomlinson then went on to break, but he had the touchdown record. Sean Alexander, when we talk about all these 90s and 2000s running backs and trying to figure out where's the differentiation, and man, to say that you were the best dude out there in a league that had LaDainian Tomlinson, even if in 2005 you didn't think he was better than Tomlinson, but maybe just had a better season or a bigger season, even to get on that plane, to be at a point where you won the MVP over a guy who was a first ballot Hall of Famer at your own position. That to me is the kind of thing that I look at. I'm like, this guy was special. He did something that was special. He accomplished something that was special. And that to me is a difference between him and Ricky Waters, who's one of my absolute favorites, and Fred Taylor, whose inclusion here I fail to see.
So Jack, I would say with Sean Alexander, like, it's key to call out. We forget about that Seahawks team that went to the Super Bowl and got hosed in the Super Bowl by the refs. Like, let's just call it as we see it. Like, he had his MVP season. He was the dude on that team and was the guy that carried him. Matt Hasselbeck was good, but certainly not a special quarterback, right? Like, I mean, I'm trying to.
I know he was the dude, and he had a not great game against Pittsburgh. They held him in check. He still had 95 yards. I mean, it wasn't like Roethlisberger bad, but it was.
And I say that also then to transition into Ricky Waters. And when you talk about Sean Alexander and you talk about like the dominance at the goal line and his ability to punch it in, at the end of the day, you're there to score touchdowns and win games, right? And Sean Alexander was a big piece of that. But so was Ricky Waters. I look at Ricky Waters when you talk about in the 90s, if we can remember back that far, good. Before you were born, Vinny, that's right. But Ricky Waters was the prototype of the West Coast offense back. Like, this was a dual threat, all-purpose guy. He was damaged as a runner. He was damn near as dangerous as a receiver. It's reflected in his totals of yards from scrimmage. He had 8 seasons where he was 8th or better, I think, in terms of total yards from scrimmage. So that's both as a rusher and as a receiver. When you talk about him versus Sean Alexander, one thing I do want to call out, yes, different situations, different teams, different thing. But on the biggest stage in that Super Bowl against the Chargers, it was Ricky Waters that had 3 touchdowns. Like, that's not a small thing, right? Like, on the biggest stage, he shined bright. And I think a lot of times Ricky Waters gets penalized for one comment that he made after he signed as a free agent with the Eagles. I think it was in reference to like putting forth effort, and he asked why. And it's taken away from just how great of a player Ricky Waters is. And I agree with you, Jack, when I look at him versus a Fred Taylor. I don't see the Fred Taylor piece, right? Good player, but like, Waters to me was more elite and more dangerous as an all-around back during his prime.
Right. And did it at the same level for a longer time. And I mean, I think Sean Alexander, if we're doing a fantasy football Hall of Fame, Sean Alexander's first ballot, right? Because he put up some fantasy football seasons that would put him in the top 5 backs of the last 50 years, probably. But we talk about peak. Let's talk about his valley, right? That's my issue with him is he just fell off the table. Like, right? There wasn't a gentle decline. It was, and for me, that's still an issue, right? I know everyone's getting into peak now, and I get it. Like, 4-year peak, 5-year peak, 6-year peak. I get that that's like the new wave, but I don't want you to just have a 6-year peak and then be just kind of like dog food the rest of your career.
Yeah.
I prefer that you be really, really great and then pretty good for a while and then maybe fall off. But that's not what happened with him, right? He went from being this incredibly dominant player to a guy that was probably shouldn't have been a starter in a shockingly short amount of time.
Totally.
And that's always going to be the thing that I have trouble with when I'm examining Sean Alexander.
And I think to your point, Bill, and those glasses frames, by the way, always styling and profiling. Fantastic, sir. I think about Ricky Waters.
And the tie. He always wears the tie.
He's always GQ'd up. When you look at his time in Seattle,
Absolutely.
like in his late 20s into his early 30s, Ricky Waters was still putting up 1,200, 1,300
1,400 yard seasons in total offense, correct, for years.
Didn't fall off until his last season, which you would expect as a 30-plus-year-old running back.
Right.
But he even had a couple seasons at 30 and 31 where he had 1,200 rushing yards and he had 400 or 500 receiving yards. So he was still a multi-purpose weapon. So I think when I look at this process and we talk about like the Darren Woodson argument that Paul made, I think was really good. When we talk about it feels right that there should be a running back in that top 15. And I look at the names that we have here, to me, there is a clear difference between it's Ricky Waters, then it's Sean Alexander, and then
a little gap, and then
that's
right. Fred Taylor, right? Yeah.
Well, I think we do have a Fred Taylor person here. Do you wanna go for that?
Hey. I think with Fred Taylor, I think the thing is though, the problem is he just played in Jacksonville. I think that's the problem. I think if he played I think he played in a town, let's say, I don't know, maybe an Indianapolis or a San Francisco or Denver, he probably would be getting a lot more Hall of Fame love. But no, he had to play in little old Jacksonville.
Okay, but let's take out. Here's a question here for you, because you're a Jacksonville fan. Fred Taylor, and I asked this really to open up this to everyone, was Fred Taylor ever the top 3 running back in a year, ever?
No, and I think that's reflected in his postseason honors. Like that could, to Alex's point, like that could partially be reflected on the Jacksonville piece. But it's not like Mark Brunell never made like Pro Bowl teams. It's not like Jimmy Smith, Keenan McCardell never made Pro Bowl teams. I look at Fred Taylor, and this is a guy that he was good for an extended period, but when can you point to he was really great? And I think, like Alec, personally, when I think about the distinction between him and a Ricky Waters, Ricky Waters was much more of a weapon in the passing game, and the running numbers are very similar. If you want to point to, Fred Taylor and say like, he had longevity, he did, but I think we've got another guy that had longevity that was just better.
Well,
Not only that,
Priest Holmes, and then he was good before he got injured. And then you had like the LaDainian Tomlinsons and the Sean Alexanders, and then he had those problems. He was not in the conversation because there was all those guys there, and even the guys that were kind of like him, and he was kind of like him, that had that, he had that short peak that said, hey, that's Hall of Fame worthy to me.
But maybe Fred Taylor wasn't in that conversation because he didn't.
Fred Taylor is one season away from not even being eligible. You take out his 2007, that's the only year he made a Pro Bowl or an All-Pro, and without that, he's not even eligible for the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah, not only that, when I look at Fred Taylor, like I think Tiki Barber was a way better running back during his time and a way higher average in terms of running back. And not only that, like you look at other guys at the time, I would say that, what's the name? I would say that Jamal Lewis. Yeah, he had 1 year in which he was a Pro Bowler, but that was also a year that was a year that he was getting MVP consideration too, and he was a way more important piece of those Ravens teams than Fred Taylor was for those Jaguars teams. Like, I don't really know how much of a difference Fred Taylor is compared to someone like a Corey Dillon, or even especially someone like a Tiki Barber, other than just the fact that they're looking at the number of rushing yards he has as opposed to his total play compared to his contemporaries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the other thing with the Jacksonville thing is, like, I know that now we look at it and go like Jacksonville, but there was a hot minute there where Jacksonville was one of like the most exciting, best press teams in the NFL. They were expansion team in 95. So 95, 96, 97, 8, and 9.
And then beat the Broncos in the playoffs in 96.
Right. So by 1999, it only existed for 5 years. There was none of this Jacksonville stink. They were hot. They had Brunell,
Right.
as you said, he had Pro Bowls. Jimmy Smith was, I thought, a future Hall of Famer when I was watching him in Jacksonville. They had Keenan McCardle, who went on and scored 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. They had obviously Tony Baselli, who just got in. And they had that defense, my boy Carnell Lake.
About time.
And they had Carnell Lake, and they had Tony Brackens, and they had Bryce Pop, and they had Kevin Hardy. I mean, they had some player, Fernando Bryant. Like, they were tough, and they were a real tough out. And even in all of that, and think about the hype in 90. All right, if you want to talk about like narratives, and I can't believe I just said that. If you want to talk about like the kind of like hype that can drown out the reality of a player. We lost Brian. If you want to talk about that, then you can talk about things like, fashion trends, and the way that 90 sports were all about like all these colors that hadn't been jerseys yet, like teal and orange and all this stuff. Jacksonville was like a hot commodity. They were new. They were the South. They had those cool jerseys. They had all these great players. And even in all that, Fred Taylor could not make a Pro Bowl.
Here's the thing, right?
I think like we're confusing the stink of the Jaguars.
Let's look at his numbers.
There's an easier way.
We talked about, was he one of the top running backs in his era, right? There were only 2 seasons in Fred Taylor's career that he was 6th in the league in rushing. Those are, compared to his peers during his career, that's as high as he got. Now, he's got a bunch of 1,200, 1,300 yard seasons. He's got a 1,500 yard season. But he was only 6th in the NFL.
Yep.
And so if you want to talk accolades and, where he was playing and all that, fair enough. But these are running backs. What do the rushing numbers look like? And when I look at Fred Taylor's numbers, I'm like, he is not, again, we've talked about, like Jack and others have talked about, there's that whole grouping, right, of those running backs from that late 90s, early 2000s. They're all grouped together. And I'm sorry, but Frank Taylor is not at the top of that level. And the numbers show us that.
And I think you would even look at him and say, I think Jackie brought up the Jimmy Smith piece. What Paul brought up was really good too. Like, I looked at Jimmy Smith as a potential future Hall of Famer. I thought Fred Taylor was a good, solid back. I would almost compare him to like a glorified Matt Forte to bring the Bears in. And to your point, the numbers back up that Fred Taylor was not in that class. He wasn't mentioned because he didn't belong there. And we can't conflate the stink of the Jacksonville Jaguars of recent years to the buzz of them of the first decade.
They were hot,
where
man.
they were
the Charlotte Hornets of the NFL.
Fred Taylor got plenty of attention. He just didn't get the accolades to go with it because relative to his peers, he did not merit it based off of performance. That's
so guys,
he was hurt.
Can I add one thing? I think the thing with Fred Taylor, he finished at like 11,600 yards. And with a career like that, there's a lot of guys who played longer careers and piled up the stats, like a Jerome Bettis, for example.
Frank Gore.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's where he has tough sledding.
Frank Gore, Jaguars legend. There's no Trevor Lawrence on the Jaguars without him. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if he played a little bit longer and compiled like another 4,000 yards, then there's probably a lot more buzz or conversation, even though the All-Pro or the Pro Bowl stuff. It's a tough one. I mean, even Curtis Martin. I mean, there's guys like that out there who are in the Hall, but they played a lot longer and had a lot more stats.
Did someone just
Pretty
say that
much
if Fred
everybody
Taylor had
ahead of Fred
4,000 more
Taylor on the
yards?
career rushing list, which he's at 17, is in the Hall of Fame. Thurman Thomas, Franco Harris, Marcus Allen, Marshall Faulk, Jim Brown.
that's
Career accumulator, absolutely. But if you look, that's where he is, and I'm not disputing anything anybody said about the fact that he was never the dominant guy, didn't finish in the top 6, and wasn't the all Pro Bowl guy, but he will be the cutoff. He has more than Waters, way more than Alexander. Matt Forte has more than Alexander, for reference. But and Ricky Williams does too. But so it's
Fred
just where
Taylor.
you do this.
But Fred Taylor got in on the process. At least it feels like the main Hall of Fame process because of the total career numbers, like the total career.
Absolutely.
Well,
Because
even
you look
more,
at-
only thing he
but
can
we gotta
name is
understand he was hurt. He had injuries.
Well, yeah,
that doesn't help his case.
I mean,
Right.
Jamal Lewis spent a year in prison, came out and ran for 2,000 yards.
Hey guys, I love this running back stuff, but we're running on. So let's
Let's go to the
let's stop being
offensive lineman.
Yeah, I was gonna say for the sake of Fred Taylor's family, let's just move on to Jari Evans and Reuben Brown are the 2 offensive linemen here.
All right, I'll keep it real quick with these 2. Number one and it's kind of related. Reuben Brown is getting late in his eligibility. He was also someone who, in my opinion, defined his position for a long time. A lot of Pro Bowls in Buffalo, came over to the Bears and was a key guy in a Super Bowl team. Evans is awesome. You don't need him here in his first year. You don't need him here in his first year. You don't need Harrison here in his first year. You don't need Bolden and Smith here in their second year. You don't need, I think that really should be reserved for guys who you would put in on their first, Joe Thomas, Revis, Ware, Hester, guys who were really that dominant player and, or had that dominant resume or both ideally. And I just don't think that some of these guys, Evans, Harrison, I think there's a few others, Freeney, Mathis, you don't need these guys this high at this point.
I'd agree as a Saints fan too. So I'm obviously very big on Evans. Saying that in terms of trying to take myself out of the Saints gear, in terms of how the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I think we're all in the same agreement here. A lot of these discussions would not be happening if the Pro Football Hall of Fame sort of came into existence maybe 20 years earlier. And then we wouldn't have such a backlog. So
also if they elected everybody, we had years where we had 2 out of the 5 finalists go in.
Right.
That's true.
We had a year
would have had my most wanted in.
We had a year that we had only 4 people and they were all quarterbacks.
So I was just gonna say, so selfishly, I'm happy that Evans is, I guess, in the real one, a semifinalist, because I know how well that's going to bode for him. I think he deserves to be there, but he's not someone I'm pushing for right now because there's time. Take that for what you will.
So, Kirk, are you saying Evans is a New Orleans player, not a Green Bay player? You're pushing.
So I guess he would be
the joke of the night.
Here would be my one push on Reuben Brown. And maybe, Jack, this is just where you and I disagree. I don't think Reuben Brown was that great in Chicago. Now, granted, that was towards the tail end of his career. He was not Olin Kreutz. Bullshit.
I didn't say he was Olin Kreutz. I said, "Oh, come now."
No, I'm pointing out, like, when I looked at Reuben Brown, I thought he was just as liable to get a damn holding penalty as he would anything else. He was a good player.
Here we go.
By the time we got to Chicago, I don't think he was, let's say, what he was in Buffalo. And
no, but he was still a 16-game starter on a Super Bowl team who helped change the culture. To a man, everyone on that team talks about what Reuben Brown meant to them.
Yeah, but that's like saying Jason Hayward's fucking brain delay speech in Game 7 helped the Cubs win the Super Bowl. Like, okay, how does that reflect in terms of on-field performance?
If Jason Hayward had a string of like 9 straight All-Star appearances in Atlanta, then yeah, sure, maybe that we could talk about that. And, hey, listen, also,
didn't we have a no off tangent rule here?
Yes, we did. Jeff
I should mention this when it comes to Reuben Brown, too. I think what really hurts Reuben Brown as to why he hasn't been seen by the voters as much is because he came into the league in the middle of the 1990s, just after the Bills had their pseudo dynasty, pseudo as and sort of was, sort of wasn't. But then he had all of his Pro Bowls, and then in the front half of the 2000s, he had his Pro Bowls as well. I call a Reuben Brown someone who spent the majority of their career in the back half of one decade and the front half of one decade. I think that itself is a huge reason as to why he hasn't gone forward, because if he played his career at the start of one decade and the end of another, he probably would be someone that would have gotten seen higher. But because he had that unfortunate situation of being born
Oh, no.
being born at the wrong, he gets penalized, and I don't think that's really right. So yeah, I think that's a big reason to why he hasn't been seen further in the process.
All right,
because
so
of
guys,
when he was born.
for the interest of time here, because we don't want to go over 2 hours because we've done that before. We're just going to lump for the next 5 minutes. We're going to open this up to the remaining people. Evan, correct me if I'm wrong.
I got him. It's London Fletcher, Eric Allen, James Harrison, Robert Mathis, Steve Smith. Ben Coates and Rodney Harrison, but we're not really talking about that.
All right, so we're doing this for the next 7 minutes. Go.
Ben Coates.
Yeah, Ben Coates.
Go ahead, Jack.
Ben Coates, another guy who I thought defined his position. I think there's only one tight end from the 1990s in the Hall of Fame. It's Shannon Sharpe. He obviously should be in, but after that, you don't have anybody. You've got 9 quarterbacks from the 90s who are in. I would have loved to have seen Keith Jackson. I would love to see Ben Coates, 1,000-yard season, Super Bowl, blah, 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 blah. Here's what I'm interested to know. Because a lot of those guys who we just mentioned are very, very early. You know, London Fletcher, first year semifinalist, first time as a semifinalist, he's 5th year of eligibility. I think we mentioned Mathis, Steve Smith, guys we like, guys we don't like, whatever. There's a long time to talk about them. I want to hear who has something to say about Eric Allen. And I know you do, Bill. Let's hear it.
And I don't know how much people care about like approximate value and all that kind of stuff, but with the exception of Deion Sanders, if you look at both quantitative and qualitative and talk to guys that played in that era, with the exception of Deion, there's not anyone else who most people who played in that era that I've talked to, and I've talked to a friend of players who played in that era, that they see as clearly better than Eric Allen. Deion Sanders is seen as clearly better. Everyone else, it's kind of a fight, right? And he played. Now, what works against him, I think, is that he played not a lot of different places. He didn't have like 8 years in one place, right? Where there's a strong sense with both the fan base and then writers that this is our guy.
He had 7 years in Philly
against him, but he was great. He wasn't good. He was a great cornerback. And there was times when he played against, I love Aeneas Williams. And Aeneas Williams is in the Hall of Fame. And I think that they're extremely comparable in almost any way you can compare cornerbacks, right? Eric Allen played at a very high level for a very long time. He could cover big receivers. He could cover extremely fast receivers and often was asked to cover the other team's fastest receiver.
Yeah, he had 16 games or more every year of his career except one.
But here's a question I have for Eric Allen. Is he had 7 years in Philadelphia? I think most people do associate him with either Philadelphia or Oakland.
I think most think I would say Philadelphia is probably the place where most people.
I say Philly.
Like if you look at him, like how much did he benefit playing behind that defensive line that had Reggie White and Clyde Simmons and the dearly departed Jerome Brown, right? Like that is a thing. And I try to think of, he got a lot of the postseason accolades in Philadelphia, and then when he went to New Orleans and Oakland, he never did. And you look at like the 54 career interceptions is a number that stands out. And we've seen other corners in a different process within the Hall of Fame bucket get in, and that's literally all they had. So it's like, I look at Eric Allen and I say, he probably hasn't got as much respect in the process as he should, but I don't view him in the same light as an Albert Lewis, let's say. And I challenge you, like, if you go back and watch some of the old Eagles games, there are times where Eric Allen, I think the perception of him being a shutdown guy does not necessarily match the reality, similar to how the notion of, oh my God, the Eagles, the defenses of that era under Buddy Ryan were so great and dominant. They were good, sometimes very good, but they aren't as all-time and special as people like to remember them as.
Well, here's what I will say. And I don't use the term shutdown because I just don't believe in it. I mean, even Dion was a guy that some people went after. I mean, not often, but some teams had success against him. Even Dion. Like I said, I played defensive back. Everybody gets got, right? You could go. I can find Mike Haynes. Name a guy. Mel Blunt, where they got. I understand what you're saying about that, and every great corner played. Try to find me a great corner who didn't play with good defenses. You know what I mean? Like all the great corners played on good. Whether it's the chicken or the egg, you're not going to find a bunch of great corners on bad defenses. Like that's not a thing that you see. Hall of Fame corners played on good defenses. Like that's true of pretty much every single one of them. So I don't mind that he played on good defenses, and sometimes even very good defenses. And I'm agreeing that because of Buddy Ryan's aggressiveness, they gave up plays, right? Because he liked to bring 7 and sometimes even 8, right? He would literally bring 8. You grew up watching the Bears, but he didn't become less aggressive when he became a head coach. He became more aggressive when he became a head coach, in many ways as a coordinator. So as great as those defenses were, they brought the house sometimes. That means you're truly on an island, right? I mean, because they went 0 blitz, probably more than they should have, actually, right? With as we just went down and shout out to my cousin Byron Darby, who was on some of those teams as a rotational guy, but still on there. But the point is that when you're bringing pressure, and nobody had a higher pressure percentage, right? I mean, he brought extra guys more than any other. That defense, nobody brought extra players in the blitz more than they did. That means that your corners have to hold up. It means you have to trust your corners to do that. He trusted his corners. That's all I'm saying, is that Eric Allen played a lot, even probably more than Dion, with no safety help, right?
Yeah, I will clarify here, Bill.
Or as much.
Yeah, I just clarify. Like, I'm looking at this as much of a numbers thing as anything. And maybe it leads a larger conversation to me of like, should Eric Allen be further in the process than a Rondé Barber? Like, because you've got an Albert Lewis, you've got a Rondé Barber. If we said like Eric Allen is in our 15, then that's 20% of the overall slots are all dedicated to corners. And that's the one piece I struggle with. So I don't want to make it seem like I don't support Eric Allen. It's more of like a maybe not this year for Eric Allen, although I know the clock is ticking on him.
Oh, and to Will's point, yes, I would have Woodson right there with Sanders as well. I'm just saying that it was at least a fight, right? Everyone sort of agrees it's Dion, and then nobody discusses that. I'm saying that once you get beyond Dion, at least it's a fight for the number 2. I too would support Woodson over Dion. I mean, Rod Woodson was so ludicrously good, but I don't think I punish Eric Allen for not being Rod Woodson. Like that doesn't seem fair to me either.
Yeah, that's why I didn't bring it up on the broadcast.
Bill, this is my question, and I think it's going to pivot us into our vote. And I think the only person we haven't mentioned, I think, is Rodney Harrison, and I don't think we're going to move him into the 15. I mean, I don't want to like try to sway votes right now. I love Rodney Harrison, I'll support him, but this is my question for you. Looking at the numbers game of having 15 slots, I assume you're on board with Revis.
I mean, I could wait on Revis. I know people are going to hate me for this.
Okay,
I thought he was tremendously great. I feel like if he takes him another year to get in, I'm not going to blow my brains out, right? It doesn't drive me nuts that he waits the year. That's another guy where the whole drop-off thing also sort of nags at me.
I mean, like how he was like the end of his time with the Jets and with the Chiefs. He basically made business decisions most of his time. Like a big reason why I personally did. Listen, I'm from New York. I've watched so many Jets and Giants games throughout my life, and Revis was absolutely dominant, no question. But I'll be honest and say I'm fine with him waiting a year, if I'm being frank.
Well, my question is not whether he waits a year to be in the class. My question is whether he waits a year to be in the finalists, which that would seem to be sacrilege.
Oh no, he should be a finalist in his first year.
Okay, so what I'm saying to Bill is, and I just want to hear it, and then I think we can, Evan, probably go to voting. My question is, oh no, Paul's leaving. Oh, we got to vote. Can't lose Paul.
Paul just sent me his votes.
Oh, good. Okay.
Paul, don't leave us.
Merry Christmas.
Leave us.
So Bill,
but that's sort of a good way to sort of segue into that. So let's just do Jack, your last point, and then
yeah, it was a question for Bill, which is how do you weigh out the issue of you've got Revis, then you've got Albert Lewis as a final year guy, then you've got Barber, who's been now on this ballot for a really long time, and then you've got Eric Allen, who, if you want to put Eric Allen in, it's like it's time to go on Eric Allen, who's at like I think 17.
Right.
How do you personally weigh that out?
So I'm not one of those people that worries as much about, oh, is that too many of this position? I mean, as was pointed out earlier, we've had years where it was just quarterbacks. Now, did I dislike that? Yes, I disliked that.
Okay.
but it's not one of those things where I'm going to say, oh, I can't put in too many of. If a player is deserving, I'll move them forward.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. So we are getting into it. Just one thing on Rodney Harrison quickly. Very good incredible with the Chargers, incredible with the Patriots, completely turned around. Defense, which had been very good. They cut Lawyer Malloy for him. Also the most charitable player in the history of the NFL because nobody's been fined more than he has. So anyway, let's get to our vote. I just had to say something for him. So let's just get to our vote here. I have Paul's stuff. Kirk just sent me his. So let me start recording these as we go. Just send direct message to me and I will put them in as I get them. And we'll go from there.
Can we see the list?
Oh yeah, sure.
Absolutely, yeah. What are we voting? Like, are we go round by how many votes or
15? Everyone's putting in 15.
15.
Yeah. So I'm gonna.
So I mean, it might be the same that you put in as the pre-vote. It might not be. But that's sort of like what this whole process is about. It's about debating, having fun, and changing minds. Because I know that my mind was changed.
Change my mind.
On Tom Nalen for one. I was not big on him until Tom Hall and Ron and everyone. I never really thought about him all that much. So, that's sort of like the great thing about this process. We're getting different people from different walks of life, different fan bases. What?
That's the Canadian kumbaya if I've ever freaking heard it. Way to pull us together, Buchner.
You're gonna shit on me for being nice?
Oh, no, we love Canadians. Like Canadians are what we should aspire to be, right? No, it was like such a Canadian nice guy thing. It's like when you punch somebody and then you say sorry.
When we're playing hockey, that's exactly what we do.
Did you what do you have after your evening skate? Do you have your poutine or your craft dinner?
Beer.
Olson. Or is it Labatt?
You know what? I never see anyone ever drink Molson.
That's why it's called beer league.
There you go. Exactly. So while we're doing this, I'm gonna plug some shit.
That sounds dirty. I don't know if we can do that live on YouTube.
Well, I'm gonna plug something that I do with Evan.
Oh.
Well, that's still just
it actually sounds worse now.
Oh man! Listen, you two have known each other for a long time. I think I know where this.
We've known each other a long time. We can complete each other's sentences,
but we haven't been in the same room ever.
We haven't even been in the same country ever.
That is true.
Hide the puck.
Yeah.
Oh Jesus!
That's actually a new podcast I'm working on called Hide the Puck. But anyway, but Evan and I, we do our weekly Hall of Fame show where we look at Hall of Fame related news. So check that out. We do that once a week. It's officially titled "The Buck Stops Here." So whenever we do that, we look at who has a better Hall of Fame chance. Elevator up, elevator down. Evan gives the good, the bad, and the ugly of the week of sports. I think we ripped that off of you there, Longhorn Dave, a little bit.
Yeah, the Longhorn Dave Sportsman of the Week.
Yeah. So yeah,
but the same thing. I think we ripped off Ennio Morricone more than anyone.
So yeah, we do that, and then sometimes I'll do my smorgasbord of shit where you never know what I'm going to say, and Evan's usually worried, like, oh God, what's he going to do this time?
What people say about me too.
Well, which is a perfect segue of a show I do with Vinny. So if you like Vinny Lospinoso, Vinny will have some pretty unique ideas on his own show where Vinny makes the Hall of Fame case for. And sometimes you'll think, hey, I know this person. That makes sense. And sometimes you'll say, who the hell is that guy? But it's always entertaining. Yeah. So the show that we do. Another show that what was that?
I think someone's audio got screwed up. Keep going.
Okay. So another show that I do is How the Hell Did This Go #1, where we look at weird songs that went #1. Next one that we're on a bit of a hiatus, but we've recorded a couple things that are going to go through. One that was actually not necessarily How the Hell, but it was a lot of fun. It was Uptown Funk. So we looked at that. But next, for the first one for next year, we're going to look at the Osmonds, One Bad Apple.
Nice.
1971.
Holy shit, yes it was. That's awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna look at how the Osmonds went #1.
Still waiting for you to do those 1800 songs.
Yeah, Billboard didn't exist then, so
we can make it up. You know that. We
Grab your
By the way,
music, kids. Maple Leaf Rag is on.
When you get around to discussing crazy horses for the Osmonds, I'm your man.
Crazy work.
The Osmonds do heavy metal.
Is that recent? I don't remember that.
hey guys, does anyone still need it up? It's a lot. I'm trying to write it down and I'm screwing up. So
And this is all going to Evan, correct?
yeah, it's all going to me. So does anyone need this up so I can start recording when you guys are still talking?
Yeah,
Because I don't want to have it up and make votes change. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So just give it a minute now. I'll start compiling in a second.
Right. And I've got more shit to plug.
You're the anti-plunger, my friend.
This is Canadian commerce at its
Anti-plunger.
finest. Let's hear it from Manitoba man.
No, I'm not a Manitoba man. I'm an Ontario man who happens to live in Manitoba.
I'm sorry I didn't attribute your proper Manitoba pronouns. I apologize.
Oh man.
I gotta say, when I moved to the Caribbean 5 years ago, there was only 2 pronouns. I don't know what the hell you guys have done since I left.
You gotta blame my generation for it. I
do.
I like to apologize on behalf of all of us. I was not responsible, but my kind were, and for that I like to apologize.
All good.
No, don't apologize. Older generations could not be dickholes. Like they could try that too. Just
There you
Yeah,
go.
that's who I agree with.
kind of one of those. The world would be a lot better if people minded their own fucking business.
Mind your
sometimes.
fucking business. That's right.
And if it doesn't bother you, live and let live.
Hey
It'd be a
guys.
lot better if our world followed that.
Hey guys, does anyone need this up or can I start compiling? Or should I just however you want to
Hold
do
on,
it?
let me see it. Let me make sure I'm give me one more second. I'm sorry. I'm just
Yeah,
thinking.
no problem, man. My son-
Bill,
All right,
you're
so now we're
closing
gonna plug
major
some more
business deals
stuff
there.
here.
Come on.
Okay, so another show that I do. This crap was on national television, which is perfect for plugging. Huh? See what I did there?
Ooh.
Thank you. The last one we did was Battle of the Network Stars, episode 12. But tomorrow we're recording. Actually, this one might be right up there for you, Jeff. Do you remember a show called Learning the Ropes?
I do. I was hoping you were going to say something like Herman's Head or something.
Or Manimal.
Manimal was awesome.
Bill already did Manimal.
Of course you did. And that also sounds dirty, depending on how you want to view it. But okay.
Yes, I did Manimal. That was 2 episodes ago. Clearly, you're not watching my other shows.
But I will now, thanks to this.
Who has time for all your shows?
Here's another fun fact about
I don't
Manimal.
have all time for all my shows. No fun facts, Vinny. I'm plugging. Then your fun fact. Well, we're doing Learning the Ropes, starring, hey, this fits, Lyle Alzado as a former pro wrestler turned teacher.
Yes.
Which
So
is
much for that Canadian niceness.
Yeah, I'm still holding out for when he does Man versus Beast, the late 1990s Fox show, where they had the sprinter race the zebra.
Yes.
And they had the keys to the race, and Carl Lewis was the announcer giving the keys to the race. And the keys for the zebra was he had to get off to a good start, he had to run fast and straight, and he had realized he was in a race.
Hey, I'm sorry. Like I do have to ask about this. Have you done Half Nelson yet?
Not yet.
And why is that? You're talking. I still to this day can't figure out how a program that had a TV show that had Dick Butkus Joe Pesci, Spuds McKenzie dog. I could go on and on with the names here, right? In the middle of the 80s, how the hell was that not like a top 5 watch show?
Same reason how Joe Pesci was once in a band with Jimi Hendrix, which is awesome.
Funny stories, right?
That did happen. But yes, we're recording that tomorrow, and there's going to be 2 more shows coming up in the Bucknerverse. The Bucknerverse. Yes, because that's what I call it.
Better than
Incidentally,
DC's universe.
Well, there you go. I shit. Well, it's in better shape than the DC universe, better future. It looks like. Although I got to say, whoever sort of like making all those comments on those episodes I did with the Beachcombers and said like who's that goof with a toque who isn't very Canadian? Okay, that was me, and I am Canadian. Fuck off. But anyway,
is Goof with a Toque one of your shows?
Goof with the Toque should be your show.
Sounds like a Canadian name.
That actually sounds like a much better
just
show.
wanted to plug shit, and what happened?
I don't. Well, this is sort of the section where it usually goes off the rails. Evan always puts me back on track, but he's busy.
Yeah, I'm busy. Sorry.
Way to go,
I'm just making sure I have everybody's here. So
But we have 2 more other shows coming up in the Bucknerverse.
I'm almost done, Evan. Sorry.
No problem. I'm just making sure I have everybody's.
Please tabulate faster, because otherwise we're going to have to continue to hear the plugs for Canadian programming.
I love hearing plugs for Canadian programming. Are you kidding me?
It feels like a Canadian content portion of the show. What are we at the 5% mark?
Hey,
Don't
y'all.
need to get
You
the
realize
shit
I'm a
straight.
Canadian, right? This is what I do.
Hey y'all, I wanna while Evan adds, actually I wanna say one thing, which is like, shout out to fucking Fred Taylor, who played a long ass career, was tough as hell.
Yep.
I do agree that while I said that he would, he got plenty of shine in the early Jacksonville days, that those were like good years. There is a perception at play in terms of like what franchise you're with. I think he would be looked at differently in Pittsburgh or on the Bears, certainly Green Bay. I don't think he had a better career than Sean Alexander or Ricky Waters or Corey Dillon or Eddie George or Jamal Lewis. But he was dope, and he played a long time, and he gets a lot of shit with the whole Fragile Freddy thing, which is total horse shit.
Yep.
And you never know who's watching, you never know who's listening, you never know who's reading. So shout out to Fred Taylor, awesome career.
Well, speaking of Fred Taylor, also on the Bucknerverse coming up is, sorry, I just wanted to jump back in the plugs.
Sorry, before we go into this, Kirk, are Hader and Ted and I can't remember the guy's Zoom user. I can't remember his first name right now. Are you guys going to put in?
Well, Ted's not going to vote.
Ted's not voting. All right, Hader and Alan, you guys voting?
I don't think Hader's
Alec.
here.
Oh, he sent
Hader
it.
is here.
Missed.
Okay.
It's Hader, I missed yours. Hold on.
Okay.
All right, cool.
And Willie Anderson, if you're watching, since Jack wants to plug something, would love to have a better understanding of how you arrived at 16 sacks in 13 seasons.
Don't you think the Bengals fans also played a big role in why he's where he is?
No, I think it's the number.
It's the number that he put out that his offensive line coach reinforced without disclosing the methodology or the thought process behind it.
Right.
Would love to get a better understanding of like how you arrived at that number, especially the 3 years with no sacks allowed, because that has been proven false. Like that, we can't even argue that that's false. That is wrong.
And speaking of things proven false, Paul Lawrence and I are going to be doing another show coming up soon, where we're going to be doing some classics. We're going to be doing the classic football games. Yeah, see what I did there, Bill? You like that?
That was well done. Beautiful segue.
Thank you. Thank you. When the segues don't always work, you just make your own. It's the Canadian way. So all of you are going to be at some point invited to be special guests on that. We're going to start off with the Ice Bowl. We're going to be recording that late December, and then once a month or once every 2 weeks, we're going to do this chronologically. Bill, I believe you said you're going to be doing the Immaculate Reception.
I would be thrilled to do the Immaculate Reception.
Mm-hmm.
Happy 50th anniversary, by the way.
Right.
There you go. So all these things are sort of like working towards. And also, I've come up with another show idea that's going to be happening soon, where I look at where athletes try to sing.
Oh, Terry Bradshaw, right?
Why,
Right?
Kirk?
Why? Because I love self-infliction harm. I don't know. Did I just admit to BDSM? No.
You have such a good fan base. Why are you driving them away?
No. You say driving them away. This only gets me more interested.
Oh, and I already know the first song that we're going to be looking at. You think the Chicago Bears of 1985 were bad? There's a team that did something the same era.
Was it the 49ers?
No,
Or was
It's the
the Rams?
Chargers, right?
The Rams.
the Rams.
The Rams, yeah. And the Eagles did one too.
Three members of the Detroit Lions have Grammys. Can anyone here name them?
What's
I
that?
never knew about that stat.
3 members of the Detroit Lions have Grammys. Can anyone name the 3?
Wow,
Lim
that's
Barney.
right up my alley. I have no idea.
Lim Barney, Miller Farr, and Mel Farr are all over Marvin Gaye's greatest album, one of the greatest albums of all time. And so if you're listening to Mercy Me or a bunch of other things, and there's like right on, and those guys kind of talking in the background, that's Mel Farr, Miller Farr, and Lim Barney.
And they weren't shot to death by their dad.
Not yet.
On the
There's
day
still
before their
time.
birthday. Yeah, that too.
Too soon.
soon,
Father's
man. Too
Day.
soon.
Jesus.
The worst Father's Day. And man, his birthday was tomorrow. Could you at least wait another day?
Hanukkah,
Who's the
man.
worst father, him or Chris Benoit?
That's a great question. But
He
I would-
forgot to tap.
On the next episode of Goof with the Toque, we debate.
Oh, hey, if you're gonna get into worst NFL parents,
Ray Caruth.
Hey, this is
for the
This is
parent
gonna
of the
go-
NFL player,
Marinovic, I guess you could throw
Khalib,
in there.
Akeem Khalib's his mom, the one that had the gun. She
Okay.
went to prison for pulling out a gun, something that I don't remember exactly. I have to look that up. She was like inciting violence at a football game. And she was
Another one, I guess you can throw Javon Belcher in there, someone who's
Oh, okay. All right. Hey, stop.
his town's right next to mine. He's from West
Philly
Babylon.
Okay. All right. That's
All right, guys.
stop.
I'm working as fast as I can to try and avoid all this. So hold on.
Yes.
My apologies.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you.
Can we play the Jeopardy theme, maybe?
Oh, don't do that. That's now you're taunting me. For those of you who don't know, I lost on Jeopardy. So
Baby.
I lost.
At least you made it there.
Hey, that was a song. I remember.
Was
you
a-
talking
I
about
do.
that.
I remember. I actually officiated a wedding once, and the bride and groom played that at the reception, and nobody knew what to do. They were trying to taunt me for it.
Absolutely.
Poor guy.
Hey, at least you made it there, Evan. Don't let the doubters say
I
otherwise.
did. Hold on.
My dad finished second, is how my dad explained it on Jeopardy many, many years ago when like the prizes were way less awesome.
Yeah, like $100 was the hardest clue.
Yeah, I finished in the top.
Like $10, $20.
I was leading most of the way through, and then I got
The second question.
I got a daily double wrong. I was leading at midway, and I was leading halfway through the second round. I got a daily double wrong that I bet big on. I can never ring back in.
Oof.
What was
So
the question? No, you go big or go home, baby. That's what I say.
yeah, that's what I went home.
All right, so that one is done. Still working here. So I got
a bunch more to do. So hold on here.
I got nothing left to plug.
How about,
I can-
there's an election of some sort coming up people can vote on.
I can plug something for me personally if I can do that if you like.
Go for it.
You doing the CF Bennett special finally?
No, but no, that we'll save that for I guess April Fool's Day or something. But something even better. As you guys probably know, for anyone that has listened to my podcast, I'm a huge, massive stan of pre-NFLers. It's one of the two other. It's alongside my holy trinity of most biggest wants ever for halls of fame. I'm come here to announce that thanks to the work of yours truly, I have gotten 5 pre-NFLers into the Western Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame. Those are Oliver David Thompson, Pud Scheffelfinger, John Brawley, William Chase Temple, and David Barry. They are I can finally call them Hall of Famers. And I will be
Round of applause. Round of applause.
And I will be
That's really
going
impressive, Vinny. Well done.
and I will go to their Hall of Fame ceremony on April 22nd in the Sheridan Station Square. If anyone is there at that time on April 22nd in Pittsburgh, right across the river from Acrisure, whatever it is, stadium, no longer Heinz Field. Please DM
Three
me.
Rivers.
There you go.
No.
Thank you.
Well, different stadium. Either way, like if anyone wants to come on, please send me a DM. I'll tell Jack Teets about it. He'll gladly add you to the list, because I've done for other guys. I've like Scott Kastner. He's the writer. I've invited him. Darren Hayes. He's the historian. I invited him as well. Unfortunately, Darren can't make it. Scott, that's the day before his birthday, so maybe he can, maybe he can. But if anyone else wants to come, and if you're in the Pittsburgh area, I'll be driving all the way over there the day before. I'd love to have you as a part.
You could be
of this.
Vinny's +1.
Yeah, I can finally see their Hall of Famers. We'll wait and see when that finally happens, but at least I got them for their own state.
That's great though. Well done.
Is this where I insert the 33-0 joke, or do I not bring that?
No, don't do that. Do not do that, please. One of my bosses actually taunted me about it, and I got really angry because he said he wouldn't do that.
We'll leave it at 20-3.
I'm sorry this is taking so long, guys. It's just
it's not really more so because, like, I do want to mention that, like, it's not so much because of that. It's more so because people were actually saying that they felt bad for me, and yeah, it was rough. It really was rough.
Okay, just a football game.
Yes, listen, I'll say this: it's not going to change my feelings of him one way or another. You could, if you're going to view him as someone who, blew leads, okay, but he's also fourth all time and fourth quarter comeback. So if anyone wants to hit at me with that, take it and shove it.
Stand up to what you believe in, no matter what.
All good then.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
So I guess
preview of the 2030 show.
Yeah.
So as Paul and I are working on that other stuff, any requests to be on other shows when we look at like these big playoff games? Some of you I've already got earmarked for a few things. Whether you know
what do you have me earmarked for, Kirk?
It's I think it's going to be a few of you just for the whole 1985, but I might force Evan to go to that one, to do that one too, the 1986 Super Bowl.
My first sports memory.
Poor Tony Eason. He still wakes up having nightmares of the 46 defense.
But then also too, that part of it means you'll also have to watch that whole Super Bowl shuffle, which can also be done on Kirk Watches Athletes Sing. I haven't come up with a name on the for that show, or maybe I should just go with what Bill says, the goof with the two.
Yeah, but the Super Bowl shuffle is iconic. Like, it's had 3.5 decades of imitating.
It is iconic, but it's also awful, and it's the reason why most athletes think they can do this.
And your problem is?
That was Lem Barney and the Farr brothers.
Yeah. They don't have Grammys to show for it. They have the Grammys.
And I just looked it up. Charlie Sanders.
Yes, correct. Also Charlie Sanders.
That's four Detroit Lions.
Did Dave just make it rain? I'm sorry. I couldn't tell Dave, did you clap or did you made it rain?
Make it rain. Grammys.
Yeah, but when you do that in Texas, is it just cows who are showing up?
I love how Jack.
Oh, jeez. Nah,
I love how Jack.
All these Canada jokes, I had to throw something back at.
Oh God!
That's
if you give me more time, I'll tell you the Texas Cowboy and the California Cowboy joke. Jack, I love how you put in there, guys, we're still live, like that.
Yeah,
like that matters. He's like, I'm trying to run a
that slowed us down.
Stop here.
Yeah,
we're down to 2 people watching, and one of them's me.
I was gonna say
I'm going to 2.
I just wanted to say I'm honored to be on a show where I'm like the quiet one. This Bill can attest.
Will, how often do you speak? Because I'm known for not shutting the fuck up.
Yeah, that's me normally. Yeah, and I mean, I even this year I gave up. I have the here's my plug. I have the longest running Steelers podcast in the world, 2008.
Wow,
that's why I was voted for Hines Ward. Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, not entirely. I appreciate I appreciate in general. You would know this about me. Like, I'm very into the draft prospect, and I'm really into prospects or players who do things that are sort of outside the stats. Like I'm a real appreciator for people that play the game in ways that aren't as obvious in fantasy stats. Like, I think fantasy football is the worst thing that ever happened to football fans because they view the game differently now. That's my rant. But anyway,
Hey, Will, we didn't hear it.
but-
We didn't hear you're welcome before Vinny starts talking about Winkleback for hours. Two things. One, even though he didn't come directly from the Bears, you're welcome for Trubisky. Now you understand why he was Shinsky. Two,
I think we knew that.
Two, we haven't heard, like Jack and I haven't heard a thank you for the top 35 pick we gifted you for Chase Claypool.
Never
Like-
trade with the Steelers. Have you seen some of the recent
Right.
deals they've made? It's insanity. Unless they want to give you a 5th or 6th round pick for somebody who never played
The
again.
Bears looked at the Steelers' number 3 wide receiver and said, "By God, that's worth a second rounder."
I saw the Bears are 0-6 since they traded for him, so that's really sitting there.
He's been a
Which is
huge
all part
impact.
of the fiendish plan that Ryan Poles has to pick in the top 4 picks.
I would argue it's the Canadian in him. He's being very generous. He's being
True.
generous for the Bears retroactively because he's helping ensure they go higher in the draft. That's really nice. You got to give him credit. Really nice.
Hey,
guy.
just to temper the expectations there. We're talking about Bears football, and if I was doing the regular show, I would scream it like I usually do. The last time the Bears had the 2nd overall pick, it was because they traded up to leapfrog San Francisco because Ryan Pace didn't know what the hell he was doing, and he took the 3rd quarterback on the board in Mitchell Trubisky. So I got to temper the expectations. Like it's a point of the whole tank philosophy. The tank don't matter if you don't know what the hell you're doing. See the Philadelphia 76ers in basketball.
To be fair, it's not like Solomon Thomas is that great of a player either.
Trubisky is talked about on a Hall of Fame show.
Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, that'll be the only time.
Trubisky.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Jeff-
the
Jeff-
only time.
Oh,
We could mention him whenever Patrick Mahomes eventually retires. We'll mention Trubisky in the same way we mentioned Sam Bowie.
Listen, when Patrick Mahomes retires, I want you to have me on your show so that you can see my pinned tweet from February of the draft season saying, give us your hottest draft take that Patrick Mahomes is a future Hall of Fame quarterback.
I think I said in my draft preview for him, like he was going to be a top 5 quarterback in the league. And I regret, like, thinking back, I should have pounded the table harder for him. Like, I paid too much attention to like what other like draft heads were saying.
Yeah.
So I rectified that the next year when I'm like, no, Josh Allen is QB1. I don't give a shit what anybody else says. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Lamar was 2, and then there's like a bit of a dip.
Speaking of which, your Josh Rosen pick has really come to fruition. He's now on a 7 team. He's on the Vikings now. Like, I gotta say, I mean, Jeff, like you know the draft more than anyone else I know. I know that it doesn't pay a lot, but if I can think of anyone that'd be perfect to be a scout, it would be you. Seriously.
Who was your number 1 quarterback in 2022?
You talk about this past draft?
Yeah.
It was Willis. I
Well,
didn't say much.
hopefully he performs better than what we've seen for him this year.
For who? For
Willis.
Malik Willis?
Yeah.
Well, he
I think
hasn't
he was
got much
always going to need some
opportunity in
time.
Tennessee. He should have been.
Bill, your retro take.
Mr. Irrelevant is the best quarterback from this draft class. Wouldn't that be something?
Well, to be fair, he's also in the best situation with the easily the most balanced
He's a
team in the
Jeremy
league.
Lin situation right now. We'll see. We'll reevaluate a little bit later.
Jeff, what do you think of Desmond
Guys,
Ritter?
just so you guys know, 2 more to go, and then I'm ready. And we just got to the point we have nobody unanimous. Just by the way.
Jeff, I want to ask, what do you think of Desmond Ritter? I'm saying that because obviously, you're replacing
When he was at Cincinnati, he should. Well, first of all, he should have been starting a long time ago over Mariota. Like, that was stupid. That was that organization or Arthur Smith being stubborn just to be stubborn for stupid sake. You have to give that young quarterback the time to actually play so you can evaluate them, because you need to be able to make a determination on whether that's somebody you're going to build around for the future or you're not. And Houston did it right this year. Like, they sucked, but they gave Davis Mills enough an opportunity to say, now we're going to go into the draft and it's either going to be 5'8" Bryce Young, or it's going to be noodle arm CJ Strong, or it's going to be we hope he's Josh Allen, Will Levis. Like, it's going to be one of those guys. But at least they know they have to go get a quarterback.
Levis is
with the Steelers. It's the same thing with the Steelers with Pickett. Pickett should have been starting from day one. Trubisky's bouncing around for a reason. He's not that dude. And
The
to
only
think that
purpose
he
of their
was-
season is learning if Kenny Pickett can play or not. It's like that's
Exactly.
the only thing that matters.
Would you fire
that
Matt
was with
Canada?
Davis Mills and the Texans, as Jeff said.
Will, would you fire
Yes.
Matt Canada after this season?
I would have fired Matt Canada before he got hired. I thought that was.
There you
I
go.
love
one of
his
the worst
name.
hires
His
ever.
name is the best name ever. Sorry.
Yeah,
he
but
is a
he's a crappy
fabulous
offensive
name if
coordinator.
you're, if you're
But it
wearing a
sets
suit.
you up
If
for
you're
a lot
dude
of
with a
blame
tube.
Canada stuff. But yes.
Blame Canada.
Blame Canada. I'll say
Bigger,
this:
longer-
if you
bigger,
evaluate a
longer,
quarterback just
better.
quickly on that deal,
Bigger, longer, and uncut. Released the day I was born, along with Wild Wild West, but we do not talk about that part.
Yes,
nice.
we get it. You're young.
you can judge your quarterback prospects ahead of time, and some people will do better than others. But I'll tell you this: if you judge the day after the draft, once you see where they go, I think you have a much better idea about
The
gonna
situation
happen.
matters so much, and that's what the challenge, like with even the Justin Fields evaluation for me, was like I saw the elite upside in terms of the athletic ability and the arm strength, but he also had Trubisky-like characteristics, and they still are there, whether Bears fans want to realize it or not. He still has a bad tendency to stare down his primary option. He has a struggle to not necessarily see the field, but process what he sees and then react to it. And even now for the Bears, Justin Fields is not a bust because of his running ability. However, you cannot evaluate him as a passer because Ryan Poles did such a crappy job of putting anything around him this year. You're literally going into this offseason like everything has to be around that and trying to evaluate what Justin Fields can be as a passer. Similar to what the Eagles did last offseason, right? They make the trade for A.J. Brown. You've got other pieces in place. Like you have to go all in on the young quarterback. And that's – go ahead.
Weird question. Asking you, Jeff. This is Jack, if you want to chime in. Considering you're both Bears fans, who is the most exciting quarterback that you remember watching Bears football outside of Jim McMahon?
Jake Cutler.
I would extend my middle finger, but this is a Canadian show, so we don't do that here.
Bobby Douglas.
What's that?
Bobby Douglas.
Oh, God. that may be your time. No, I honestly, it is Justin Fields. It is Justin Fields in terms of like pure like excitement. It's Justin Fields by far. Cutler was only exciting in the sense of you didn't know whether that turd Ferguson was going to throw it to his own receiver or somebody else.
All right, guys, I'm finally got everything here.
Yes.
Yes.
Now,
Way to go, Evan.
now that turd Ferguson's been brought up, I need to cut you guys off.
Turd Ferguson.
Jake Cutler's in the top 15.
All right, so here's who I have. We're going to share the screen. I have everything blacked out again so we can go through. We had nobody unanimous. We had three got one short of unanimous for what I got in.
Well, I like the blackout. That's clutch.
Oh, wait, are you going to work from the bottom like they do, like the
Yes.
It's America.
So work
Okay,
from
that's
the
what a
bottom.
Canadian does because we started from the bottom. Now we're here.
Oh, we're working his way
There
up.
we go. So
Oh,
getting
Clever.
Boy.
Getting zero
Nice.
votes. James Harrison, Steve Smith, Willie Anderson, believe it or not.
Yes.
See, I have Steve Smith on here twice. Sorry about that. Robert Mathis and Rodney Harrison. Sorry about
No
that.
votes. Yeah.
I always
Take
want to make sure
note,
you knew that's
49
how many
voters.
votes.
Checks my ballot, confirms I don't have any of those 5.
Okay, good. With one, Ben Coates, Sean Alexander. Wait, Willie Anderson's here twice. What just happened?
What is going on with this math?
Oh my God, I don't know what happened
I
here.
have questions.
Listen,
Willie Anderson happened once.
Canadian calculus?
Yeah, I know.
The
I'm
Canadians not doing any of this.
you blame Canada anyway. Sorry, it doesn't matter. These people don't get in. So Ben Coates, Steve Alexander, Sean Alexander, Willie Anderson. All right, with 2.
Oh, we've got a tie for 50. Oh,
We
God.
do have a tie. Fred Taylor, Jari Evans, Reuben Brown, London Fletcher, Ricky Waters all had 2.
Why do you guys hate
3,
running backs?
3, Eric Allen and Jared Allen, the Allen brothers with 3. Which is interesting because Jared Allen's probably going to be a finalist. 4.
Hey, ours is better than theirs, and you know that.
That's right, Vinny.
Wisniewski with 4.
Violently disagree.
5. Darren Woodson, Kevin Williams, Neil Smith, and Reggie Wayne.
Reggie Wayne, Kevin Williams. How did Evans beat you out? Kevin Williams not influence?
Because I
people?
got the
don't
number wrong.
understand.
It screwed up the whole thing.
That means
Yeah.
Leslie O'Neal made it.
So
Your credibility was shot.
the three at the top: Ellard, Thomas,
Whoa.
and Willis.
Wow. Look at us.
10, Jarrell Rivas, DeMarcus Ware. 9 for Hester and Johnson. 8 for Albert Lewis, Torrey Holt, Zach Thomas, and Randall. We had
You
nobody
love-
at 7. And then 6 for Tom Nalen, Leslie O'Neal, Pat Swilling, Richmond Webb, and Rondé Barber.
You love to see it. You just love to see it.
So
It's
we
a
ended
great
up
process.
with 16.
All right, so can I be first to make an argument for a contested, for removing one person?
Yeah.
We don't have to. We're gonna keep 16.
Oh, we're gonna keep 16?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, then I thought it was 15 we were after.
Yeah,
Well,
but if there's a
it is,
tie,
but-
they do. It's the same thing they do in the other league.
Can you
Oh,
keep that
15
list
and
up?
ties. Then I'm not gonna say anything. because
Evan,
we'll
can you keep that list up? I wanted to
Oh, yeah, I'm
jot
sorry.
down the 15.
Sorry,
or
sorry.
16.
I'll share this all.
We'll
I
debate
just
it
want-
next time.
I couldn't see who was talking, so I wanted to know.
Oh, yeah.
What you chugging there, Kirk?
Here.
Well, what brand?
Lake of the Woods, right at the base of Manitoba.
Ooh.
Ah.
So there you go.
Oh.
Henry Ellard, Joe
Point of
Thomas,
order.
Patrick Willis, Darrell Rivas, DeMarcus Ware,
Guys.
Andre Johnson, Devin Hester, Albert Lewis, Torrey Holt, Zach Thomas, Randall Cunningham, Tom Nalen, Leslie O'Neal, Pat Swilling, Richmond Webb, Rondé Barber.
Guys, point of order.
Yeah.
In the finalist round, there are no ties. It's 15. So we need to vote one person out of the people who got 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone
thought.
send Evan one person to remove
Gosh, okay.
instead of don't send 4 people to save. Send
Right.
one person to
One.
remove,
Right.
and whoever gets the most votes of those is out.
Got it.
We just deleted them. I need to see who the people
He
are.
put him in a separate category.
Put him in the separate column here.
Oh, there they are. Okay, got it.
You know, Evan, if your math is right, you'd probably get Kevin Williams here.
Yeah, no, I wish. It was hard to keep everything going with the
Okay, let's do this
commentary.
quick though,
Lots of
guys.
things are hard in this world.
Do it fast. Send Evan your one person to
I
remove.
have sent.
And I got
This is a killer.
all right. So
Ooh, I think you just gave it away, Kirk.
No, I didn't. Well, I don't know. Did I?
No, I just put it out there for everybody. It doesn't matter. Okay.
It's okay.
I knew you would put that there though. That's all good.
hold on a second here.
So since I have nothing left to plug as we're doing counting, Jeff, plug something. You've got a YouTube show.
I do Schleg Daddy TV, where I talk about all things Bears and then sometimes some other NFL and sports takes. And then OTRS Central. I've been doing that one for over a decade. I sporadically still talk about professional wrestling, taking a semester off of school now that I've got the associate's degree. So going to get back in the fold a little bit more and rant and rave about wrestling like I'm known to do.
3.9 GPA. Give Jeff a round of applause.
Hey.
Seriously, the man grinded his ass to get where he is, and it was not easy.
What's it
But
with
he
the double
persevered.
entendres tonight?
Oh, fancy words, Mr.
Wow.
Carroll.
Yeah, but seriously, Jeff,
Hey, hater,
deserve your
I
flowers.
didn't actually see the word sent, but I didn't actually get anything sent directly to me.
That's how you do it. That's how you throw off a vote. That's how you throw off.
Strategic.
Wait to
vote.
see and say, "Oh, my vote was." Yeah.
Yeah, hold on.
Oh wait, you mean the original vote or to remove
Oh,
somebody?
the one you just sent. I just saw
Oh.
the word sent, but I didn't get it.
Because I was thinking maybe he voted for Willie Anderson 15 times. I'm just
Oh no.
Rondé. I got it.
Listen, the way I personally see it, before Ryan came along, Tiki was my favorite player growing up, and yeah,
How do you know it's Tiki? You might have been looking at Rondé the whole time.
it would be like a Marcus Williams switcheroo almost.
I'm telling you, like Tiki is going to be the least happy when Rondé gets in the Hall of Fame. There's no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind.
Hey, listen, I actually met Tiki when I was like 7 years old or something like that, when it was a book signing in Huntington.
I have all the votes, so hold on here.
Yes.
Thank God.
So in order.
Lot of cans and tumblers today.
All right. So we had staying with only one vote against, Pat Swilling. With
You're in
2
luck, Kirk.
votes against, Tom Nalen,
Tom is very happy with that.
Leslie O'Neill,
Alrighty.
and Richmond Webb.
Yep.
Rondé had 5 votes against.
Wow. Okay.
Bloody hell.
Blowout. Brutal.
Oh,
So
man.
there you
Alright.
go.
Well, I know he's going to live to fight another day.
Yeah.
Because
So
when we do
this
this
is now our
again-
class. No Rondé.
Yeah.
This is a good class. This is a really good class. Like
Yeah.
there's some balance. There's like balance and
There's
position.
no running backs.
Time.
I'll
There is
tell
no
you this,
running backs. I will
Rondé not
agree.
being there makes Albert Lewis's case a whole lot better.
Yeah,
One
like,
quarterback, no running backs.
There's no punters either.
Hey, they
sorry,
weren't-
Will, not
No,
this time.
no defensive tackles.
Hey, it's even sadder for me because I had Sean Landetta last year and I had Leckler this year, and I think I had Gerald Wilson as my senior.
Gerald Wilson was better than either of those two guys, but okay.
All right, guys, with that,
All right,
the person
I had
running
Wilson
all
as well.
this, he's got a kid that he's got. So we're going to call this. We can all keep here yapping, but right now, Ted, the person running everything, we are good to go. So thank you. So everyone just say thank you to Ted, my webmaster, for doing everything here.
Thank you, Webmaster Ted.
Thank you, Theodore.
Yes.
Now we will
For pretty
plot
much
our.
sticking around, sort of like watching a bunch of stuff that I'm not sure that he cares that much about. But thank you.
I want to know what's going on in the Castle de Buchner. Man, you look like you got a fancy place there. Like, what is that behind you?
I
Is that
really
the
don't.
skyline of Manitoba? Like, what is that?
Well, I am on the highlight of Mount Manitoba.
Let's have this conversation after we officially
You
sign
think
off.
you're like hot shit or something?
He's literally right above Canada Life Center,
Hey,
so he gets
guys,
this.